Okay, so good evening, everybody. It's been a very interesting uh, few days in the sports world. Um, Michael Carrick is taking charge, interim charge of Manchester United after the Solskjaer sacking against Villarreal in the Champions League. Yet another player has come out about the Essex cricket situation. So, on top of Yorkshire having allegations of racism and issues within the culture of that cricket club, Essex has got issues as well. Obviously, England beat South Africa by a point at the weekend in the men's rugby union. In the women's game, I mean, the record-breaking scoreline by England over the US was outstanding. Their unbeaten streak now is at 18, 19 games. Um, Kevin Sinfield has completed his 101-mile motor neurone disease run. He's raised over £1 million. Uh, ooh, one of the Kearney brothers, Rob Kearney, has decided he will retire. He is confirming he is retiring after playing for the Barbarians on Saturday. He has got 95 caps and has spent 15 years playing for Leinster. He will be retiring straight after the Barbarians against Samoa at Twickenham on Saturday. So that's interesting. He's retiring with immediate effect. So if you're a rugby union fan or you're an Ireland fan, Rob Kearney is retiring. Obviously, Xavi is now in charge of Barcelona. Very limited transfer funds available for Xavi to turn things around at Barcelona. And Sergio Ramos is due to make his debut for PSG against Man City. He'd been recovering from a calf injury, which ruled him out of the Euros, and so he hasn't possibly his first game of the season. There's a few other bits and pieces floating around. Obviously, the talk is around the Manchester United vacancy at the moment. Pochettino is one of the favourites in the running. Ironically, Steve Bruce is in the running as well. Um, the issue with Manchester United is very similar with the issue with Barcelona, a long, steady decline at the club that has been happening. Even though trophies have been won since Ferguson retired from management, the decline has been noticeable. It has been there. And you know, whoever they get in is going to face the same challenges as Solskjaer, the same challenges as Mourinho, and the same challenges as Van Gaal. And Van Gaal was sacked not because they weren't winning, because they won trophies with Van Gaal, they won trophies with Mourinho. Van Gaal was sacked because his style of football was apparently boring. It was effective. So, Man United, Ibrahimovic has come out and has been very critical of Manchester United and the direction they're taking. They are living in the past. Same with Arsenal. They are trying to compare the current squad, their current position, with previous teams and the previous generation, which I think does nothing. Um, there are issues with the balance of the side. The side is unbalanced. Defensively, there are issues. Um, you know, whoever comes in, I can see a big squad clear out in January and in the summer. I can see a lot of player movement, and the squad will look completely different by this time next year. But whoever comes in needs to be given time, more time than what Solskjaer had. It is a complete rebuild job. If this was a sport like the NFL or the NHL or the NRL or any sport that has a salary cap or league that has a salary cap, the manager is given 3 to 4 years to completely rebuild this squad, rebuild the culture from top to bottom. And if that means clearing out a lot of the senior players who aren't performing and sending youth players out on loan and squad players out on loan to get them game time and get them match fitness, and so be it. Because the situation at Manchester United right now is very much like the situation at Liverpool for 30 years in between league titles. They had Liverpool didn't win the league for 30 years. It was only only recently that they got back to winning the league. They won other trophies, including the Champions League, in that time, but they couldn't win the league domestically. And they promised much and delivered in patches. They weren't consistent enough. They were again relying on past glories. Jurgen Klopp comes along, and Rafa Benitez gave it a good go as well. Yeah, Rafa Benitez and Jurgen Klopp, the two best managers Liverpool have had in the last 30 years. And, it did take a long time, a lot of missteps on the way for Liverpool to finally reach the top step in the Premier League. And Manchester United look like they could go on a similar lengthy league drought that Liverpool did if they're not careful. The league is more competitive now. But I have to see. The Glazers are getting involved in cricket. Oh God, no! That's going to be a tournament racked with debt because it's always other people's money that they spend. Honestly, cricket is one of those sports where, much like football, I'm concerned in the direction the sport is taking, and the negative headlines that are constantly coming out in the run up to this year's Ashes, this Ashes series for both Australia and England, and the sport as a whole in recent years. I am concerned with the direction the sport is taking, and in fact, I'm concerned with the direction a lot of sports are taking. A lot of professional sports, there's a lot of negative headlines coming out on a regular basis, and it is to do with the culture within the dressing rooms, the culture within the organisations, and the direction that cricket has taken over the last 15, 16 years, 17 years. For me, is concerning that the path cricket has gone down where it has chased money over grassroots, over the fans, and it's chasing the dollars. It's chasing the dollar signs. It's chasing the money, and it's forgetting its core values. And unfortunately, it's as we've seen with what's happened at Yorkshire and Essex, and what we've seen with Australia with the ball tampering, allegations of you know racism in Australian cricket from Warner. There was allegations that he may have used some racial slurs on the pitch before the ball tampering scandal. The ball tampering scandal, what's happened with Tim Payne with what is basically a sleaze scandal, and him losing his captaincy of Australia. Um, the direction cricket is taking is very much like football. Oh yeah, cricket and football are killing themselves. It's just football's got more money to kill itself with. And yes, I am smoking, so I'm slightly killing myself as well. But at least what I'm doing is legal and not well. It's a bit frowned upon publicly, but you know, yeah, football, cricket, rugby league is just players misbehaving. There's not as much money in rugby league, but look what's happened at the Chicago Blackhawks. Look what's happened in 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 other sports where there is so much money. And the NFL, you look at the amount of NFL players that constantly misbehave. It was ironic, but you look at the amount of NFL players, it's become so normalized to fans when players do, domestic violence allegation, drunken brawls, driving offences, Michael Vick with the dog fighting ring. I mean, bad behaviour in the NFL has become so normalised over decades that it doesn't warrant a second look. And then obviously you have the Aaron Hernandez, scandal, which was a scandal because there was warning signs there about his character, his temperament, his attitude, his aggression off the field, violent behaviour. There was warning signs with Aaron Hernandez. For the NBA, there is less scandal in the NBA though. I think I don't enjoy basketball. I don't think it's a bad sport, and I have a lot of friends who do enjoy basketball, and that is fine. It has its merits. The NBA and basketball in general does not have the off-court scandal in the numbers, percentage of players getting involved, the coaches getting involved with off away, away from the dressing room behaviour that's negative. It does have certain problems. It does. The NBA does have problems, like any league or any sport. But the headlines are less negative in regards to the NBA. You look at the NHL, and there are stories coming out of the NHL and there's always been issues with player behaviour, with drink and drugs. The NBA, much like any global brand, has got to find global investment. And the NBA started to realise it was very popular in China. It's very popular in Australia. The NBA is very popular overseas, not just in America. And it's like the NHL playing games in Europe and the NBA and the NFL with the London series. They know that they've got an overseas fan base and they give back to it. And yes, they are it is very popular in China. That's partly to do with the Chinese Communist Party, promoting it as well. Obviously, China had the Olympics in 2008. They've also got this Winter Olympics coming up. So they're very keen to court American fans and American sports. And they are obsessed with European and American sports leagues. They are. On a political standpoint, it is what it is. But that's also their fan base demographic will more likely vote Democrat than Republican anyway. It's the demographic of the sport. Nothing against the fans. In my opinion, yes, the NBA, for me, it doesn't appeal to me. Basketball doesn't appeal to me. I tried playing at school. I didn't enjoy it. I prefer more contact sports, partly because I was exposed to like contact sports when I was younger, playing them, watching them. I've got friends who play football professionally, rugby union professionally. I've had mates who tried out for rugby league at a professional tryouts. I've got friends who play ice hockey professionally. So the sports I enjoy, I've actually got friends who play them at amateur and professional level, and people I've grown up with. So and I've been around these sports since I was a kid. My dad was very sporty. He played non-league football, and then he obviously competed in athletics, rugby, and football for the army and his regiment. In regimental competitions, and I think he played Army Navy match at Twickenham. So my dad was very, involved with sport as well his entire life. But some of these sports have so many off-field dramas. It we become as fans so numb to the misbehaviour. But yeah, cricket's taking the same path as football, and I fear rugby union and rugby league to a certain extent are going to go down the same path. And there are signs rugby union is starting to head down the same path. I mean, professionalism hasn't been evenly distributed. The money isn't equally distributed. We've seen issues with centralised contracts, with especially in the Welsh game, which is really striking. The Welsh game in Australia domestically. And while the game is growing in new locations and in non-traditional locations, which is great, the core heartlands and the core fan base do feel like a loss of connection. There is a certain political twinge. I mean, I think the NHL, there is a lot of local government money in certain arenas. We've seen it. Arena issues for several teams. We've seen the Premier of Quebec wanting to have meetings with the NHL about possibly having a team back in Quebec, in the city itself. But we already obviously have Montreal and their affiliate Laval. But the Quebec Nordiques were a team in the 80s and 90s. They obviously relocated to Colorado. But the Premier of Quebec, the province, wants to have an NHL team again. Now, the NHL itself has no desire to go and have an eighth team in the Canadian market. Major League Rugby, again, there is a local, city and state level. I know it's a smaller league. Same with the MLS. A lot of the stadiums are built with taxpayer money, which is forgotten. There is a lot of taxpayer involvement. There's a lot of planning permission. There's a lot of discussion between owners and the cities or counties that the stadiums are in, because obviously the US's states are divided into counties, apart from Louisiana, which is parishes, and Alaska, which is boroughs. There is a lot of discussion. But planning permission is planning permission. I wouldn't say all American sports leagues feel they have to have political affiliation. I mean, NASCAR obviously appeals to the more Republican voter base. In the locations, it's mostly in the deep south. That's its traditional heartland, or in cities that have a link to the motor industry, such as Indianapolis and places like that. So there is, it's an interesting one. There are. I wouldn't say the US women could do with a Major League Rugby. They have a very strong collegiate base. Their best players do actually play over here in Europe in the French and English league systems, which have got centralised contracts and a fair bit of professionalism. Um, the fact is, the US and the Canadians have only played. That was their fourth test in 2 years. Same with the New Zealand women as well. So the USA, Canada, and New Zealand, they haven't played for 2 years because of COVID. That has a massive bearing on how it all plays out. The Canadians, I think, were the strongest opposition that the English faced this autumn in the women's game. Um, and South Africa on the men's game, the male Springboks, they lost by a point, and on another day they win by a point or win by 2 points. It's one of them that was a 50-50 contest. In regards to New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, it's only been in the last year or so that they've been able to play test matches. South Africa weren't able to play last year, so that has actually affected the South African team. The Lions tour was their first tests for 18 months since the World Cup. Um, in regards to having a professional women's league in the US and Canada, um, the best US and Canadian players play over here in England and in France. A lot of the Canadian women's players play in the French league system, which is again just as strong as ours. Um, and there's your problem. Their best talent actually doesn't play. What European league does the MLS compare to? That's a very difficult one because it's a rapidly expanding product and league in the US and Canada. And the grassroots player base is expanding every year with kids and teenagers taking up the game through high school or through their local mini junior leagues. There's now a competitive minor league structure as well. There's actually now a football pyramid in the US and Canada. There is collegiate programs as well. Of course, they'll call it soccer over there. Um, so the game in the last 15 years has just exploded. All since David Beckham decided to go to LA Galaxy. That is the moment that the MLS explodes. Before then, from '96 until David Beckham's move to LA Galaxy, the league was struggling. It was really struggling, really struggling. David Beckham is the catalyst for the MLS for what it is today, and now he's a team owner. You couldn't make that up. While his team isn't very good, Inter Miami, the fact is, without David Beckham, and then the other players, who played in the European leagues like Ibrahimovic and Kaká and Pirlo, Gerrard, following in his footsteps, um, you don't without David Beckham, you don't get the other players, following on and growing the game. Um, and yes, the US missing out the 2018 World Cup was a massive blow. And I actually like watching the MLS. I don't know what league it would compare to. It's difficult because each league has its own style. Each league has its own, style of play, own pace of play. Some leagues are more technical. Other leagues are more physical. The Premier League is, I think, the pinnacle league where you have a blend of physicality and pace and skill, which is why the best European players or European-based players and South American players want to play in the Premier League at least for a couple of seasons to challenge themselves. It's the league with the most money. It's probably the most competitive of the European leagues. Out of all the European leagues, not just the top five, but all of them, for who wins the title, who wins the domestic cups, who qualifies for Europe. Even big sides have been relegated before, who've won trophies. So, in that regard, it is very, very difficult to compare the MLS. It is very, very difficult to compare, and that's the difficulty because of the structure of the league. The fact it's a franchise-based system. There's no relegation. You've got conferences, so you've got playoffs at the end. It's very difficult to compare that league setup to any league in Europe or South America. It really is. On playing standard, I would say it is of the standard of the European leagues. Maybe not the top five. Might be of the same standards as the French league, for example, which is in the top five, which is the weakest of the five big leagues. But you could compare the standard to any professional European league for the fitness levels, at least, if not the skill. The product is growing. New teams are getting added, it's expanding. I wouldn't be surprised if the MLS ends up at 32 teams eventually. And then the conferences, you might have the odd interconference game. where you rotate your interconference opponent in the future. But because you have a playoff structure and because it's a franchise-based league, there's no promotion relegation. It's a different style of football. So you can be a really bad team, and not really get overly punished for basically being bad because you get rewarded with draft picks. And it's a salary cap league as well, with exceptions for the overseas players, where it's a soft cap system. So I can't really compare the MLS because of its structure, because of the style of play, because of the draft system to the European leagues, where the European clubs will develop from within, from youth level to under 18s to under 21s, reserves, and then onto first team. Um, I would say, yeah, Canada, the football association football soccer in Canada is mostly in the Ontario area for the hardcore, and there are other cities like Vancouver that have a team as well. But the hardcore growth of the sport is in Ontario, in the Toronto metropolitan area, and yes, Vancouver, obviously with the Seattle Sounders across the border, Vancouver's a hotbed as well. But the majority of the Canadian players are from the Toronto area. Now, again, much like the US, with Major League Soccer, the Canadian Soccer League is a developmental league for Major League Soccer, for Toronto FC and the Vancouver Whitecaps. Um, so it's a difficult one because the majority of the league play in the US. There's I would say this, because there's no promotion relegation and it is a franchise based system and it's not played at the highest level in Canada. Um, and again, the best Canadian players, Pesca Solido is, I think, the most famous Canadian player that I can think of, and he played over here for Sheffield United and Derby County in his playing career, amongst other clubs. Paul Pesca Solido. Um, they don't have many players of note, where the US have had some decent players. Partly because they have a bigger player base. But if you look at the Canadian sporting makeup, it's NHL in winter, CFL in summer. Um, you've got the Blue Jays, you've got the Raptors. They're based in Toronto. You've got Toronto Arrows. They're based in Toronto. So unless it's the CFL or NHL, I mean, the NBA's been to Vancouver before. There's a reason why it failed in Vancouver. I can look at the favour of the NBA in Vancouver, much like the NHL failing in Atlanta twice and Kansas City. The It is a difficult one, but when you're trying to compare, different leagues, they all have their own different style. But the US Canadian system is franchise based, and Canada is very multi sports. But the two big sports are the NHL in winter and the CFL in summer, and that's how you look at it. That's how you look at it. Um, and the CFL is a weaker version. It's a different style of American football to the NFL, and a lot of people believe the NFL should be playing CFL rules, or tweaking the rules to be similar to the CFL, because it's the better brand of American football. It's quicker paced, it's a wider and longer field, 3 downs instead of 4, less stoppages, um, and so it's slightly different. At the same time, it's the same basic principles of the game. You still have downs, you still got a quarterback, you've still got running backs, you've still got, linemen, linebackers. So the positions are all the same. It's just the pitch is slightly different dimensions, and you have 3 downs instead of 4. So the style of play is slightly different. But Canada has a very good sporting pedigree in both the summer and winter sports. You just look at the Olympics. You look at the World Championships. Any sport. The Canadians have got a good motorsport heritage. They've got a good athletics heritage. But it is interesting. And these are interesting questions, because I wasn't expecting this many questions on North American sports. The big sports stories at the moment is who's going to be taken over at Manchester United. Now, Pochettino, currently at PSG, is the favourite to take over. And there are a lot of stories coming out of PSG that he doesn't see eye to eye with Leonardo, the former Brazil legend, who's director of football. And there's issues over, transfer policy, player scouting, and Pochettino's role as purely as first team coach manager. He doesn't have a lot of say um, in player transfers and player scouting. What is the longevity of these new massive state-of-the-art NFL stadiums like Vegas? That is an interesting one. Considering where obviously the Raiders were playing in Oakland, the Oakland Coliseum was just falling apart. Um, they have to be sustainable, obviously, for the future. It's like what was KeyBank Arena is now obviously in Seattle is now where the NHL play in what's it called? It's got a funny name, um, a Green Energy Arena or something. They had to completely revamp KeyBank. So they weren't didn't knock it down. They just refurbed it inside and out. Um, and that's an old arena. Madison Square Garden, I think, is the oldest current NHL NBA venue. I think its current building was in 1964 or 68, and it's been refurbed since then. But the actual structure itself is really old. It's an old building, and that's just showing its longevity. Because if they constantly make sure they refurb it, and they have the money to keep it tip top. Um, Longevity, that's an interesting one. I mean, I don't know is the answer. The amount of money they've spent on it, it I would be surprised if it, doesn't last. They've put a lot of investment into that facility in Vegas, but the NFL is on the back foot in Vegas because the NHL got in there first, and the NHL got a brand new franchise, whereas the NFL in Vegas got a second-hand franchise that was relocated, not for the first time, and hasn't been the most successful in recent years. Yeah, you would have to expect the Vegas to be there for quite some time. I also believe that it may be used in the World Cup in 4 or 5 years' time when the US, Canada, and Mexico have the World Cup. To have that kind of investment and the size of the stadium, I would expect that when the World Cup comes calling um, in 2026, that that'll be one of the stadiums that the organisers want to use. Vegas, until the Golden Knights went there, apart from boxing and MMA, Vegas was and pro wrestling. Vegas was very underutilized as a sports city, considering the US Canadian markets. It was amazing. I mean, yes, they've had an international hockey league team and they've had some minor hockey league teams in Vegas. But I was very surprised that the first major league team to go to Vegas was the Vegas Golden Knights ice hockey in the middle of the desert. That is how surprising I am that Vegas was lacking so far behind other major sports markets in the US and Canada. That it took that long until 2017 to get their first, major league franchise. I wouldn't be surprised if the MLS ends up going there as well, because baseball isn't there, the NBA isn't there. I'll be very surprised if the MLS doesn't want to get in there first, get that market share, and then the other sports being lagging behind. I'm surprised T-Mobile Arena doesn't have an NBA franchise as well. But I would expect the Raiders to be there for a very, very long time. But the Raiders as an organisation have had a very unstable history and they have moved a lot. They've moved out of Oakland more than once. And if they were to move, if the NFL wasn't to work in Vegas, which I hope it does, um, look, they bought into the NHL. And there was a lot of people who were very sceptical when Vegas were awarded the expansion franchise back in 2016 for the 2017-2018 season, that it would work in the desert. They were expecting, you know, the shine to wear off after the first couple of seasons, attendances to drop. That hasn't been the case. It hasn't been the case. Seattle, I'm looking at even though the Seattle team isn't playing very well with the Kraken, there already was a hockey fan base there. There's minor league hockey in Seattle. It's they had an arena. It just needed revamping. They did that. They wanted to come in a year earlier, but they just they pushed it back to this season. They wanted to come in last season. COVID obviously would have screwed that up anyway. But I am surprised with Vegas that the NHL was the first major league that's still consistently going that went there. The International Hockey League was meant to be a rival league to the NHL. It fizzled out. But I am surprised Vegas took as long as it did to get a major league team. Um, Field hockey. It's like lacrosse. Lacrosse has got there's a professional lacrosse league in North America. It's not a bad sport for TV, but it's an interesting one. I mean, part of it, I think, is to do with the fact there's not as much interest for field hockey in the US and Canada. If like, let's say the British League, for example, was to, put, league games on YouTube, which other sports have done, and and then the US pick it up, then yes, I can absolutely see it suddenly having a big pro league. But part of the reason is, as a global sport, it doesn't have a following in the US and Canada, as far as I'm aware. As far as I'm aware, field hockey is nowhere near as popular in the US and Canada for whatever reason. But if someone was to, like, set up like a YouTube channel and put live or match replays, full match replays, and the US to pick it up and start watching, then I think you'll see things change. The reason why they got rugby union, and the reason why they want to get rugby league, and the reason why the MLS is so popular is there's a lot of American expats who've come over to Europe, gone to Australia, and there's a lot of military bases. Bearing in mind where the US military get based overseas, they get based in Europe, they get based in the Pacific region, so Australia and New Zealand. There are US military facilities out there in the Philippines. And that's why mixed martial arts become so popular in the US and Canada. There's a lot of military presence in Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, where martial arts are major sports and major, activities that people do just to keep fit and healthy. And why do you think MMA is so popular in the US? A lot of US servicemen and women are based over in countries that have mixed martial arts. Um, the NBA has become popular in Australia partly because of the US expats. Because US personnel will maybe meet an Australian person, get married, and then, have a kid. They may go, I'm retiring from the military. I've got the skills to come over to Australia to work a trade, and settle, which they have done, and they bring their culture with them. This is why the NFL keeps going to London. It's not to have a team here. It's because there's a lot of expats and business types who have. There's a lot of Americans living and working in London, mostly in the financial sector, and they will pay to go to games. They'll pay for the nose because they're paid enough anyway with their salaries for relocating over here to go and watch a game. Baseball's really popular in Japan and Korea because of the US personnel. It was already popular before the Second World War, but it's even more popular now because of US military personnel based over in Korea, based over in Japan, based over in the Philippines, and that's why baseball, Major League Baseball, is exceptionally popular, and the domestic leagues are really strong and healthy, and the best players play over in the US. It's the level they're playing at. I mean, it's mostly played in private schools, and it's mostly in the UK at least, and it's mostly played at university. I wouldn't say it's regularly got too many stoppages. If it's a good game, and both sides are equally of an equal standard, there shouldn't be too many stoppages. I have played it. There will be stoppages, true, but at the same time, you have to understand and watch more than one game, and be willing to sit through several games, and also have someone with you who knows the rules, who plays the game or watches the game regularly, just to guide you through. This is like when I go to ice hockey and there's like new fans. I used to find this a lot, and they'd be like, "What's going on? I'm not understanding." And a lot of hockey fans don't take the time to explain to new fans who are coming for their first or second game what's going on. And I took my mum to a game once, to an ice hockey match, and she was clueless, absolutely clueless. And she referred to the puck as the ball. And there was about 2,000 people who just suddenly shut up and looked at her. I was like, "Oh Christ." And I said out loud, "Don't worry, she's a newbie. I will explain. It's my mum. She's having a senior moment." She didn't take that kindly. It was like her 50. It was my birthday. So. But I sat down with my mum and I actually explained what the referee was calling penalties for, what was going on, what was a good play and a bad play, what was a missed call, why that decision was made, why that's offside, uh, and why the players outfield when it's got called a hand pass and things like this. A lot of fans are hardcore, so their parents were fans or their best friends were fans. They went to games when they were young. Getting into a sport as an adult is very, very difficult. Quite frankly, it is very, very difficult if you've solely been a football fan, or in your case, a baseball fan, or a rugby union or rugby league. Remember, there are different. Rugby league and rugby union are different. Remember that. I will do a video explain the difference between union and league. I will. If you've only ever watched, pro cycling, like road cycling and stuff. If you're into motorsports, if you are an adult and you're getting into sport, it is actually more difficult. A, to admit you're a new fan, and B, to be brave enough to ask a fan who's been watching a sport for 20, 30, 40 years, what's going on? I'm confused. And well, again, it's a high school game, so the standard's lower. And in the US and Canada, it's not as popular as I think it should be. And I don't think every single high school plays it. Um, they're mostly obsessed with baseball, American football, ice hockey if it's like Minnesota and Wisconsin and those border states with Canada. Ice hockey is very popular. So certain areas of the US play certain sports. Now, American football is played almost at every high school. Every high school will have a basketball and NFL team. Basketball you can play, in the sports all year round, not a problem. American football you can play all year round. Some high schools have a massive amount of funding. They have all weather pitches. If it snows, if it rains, they can play. The pitch ain't going to fall apart. Baseball, some high schools in the southern states where it's warmer and drier play baseball because it's the weather conditions are conducive enough. So field hockey, I mean, can you imagine playing field hockey in Minnesota in the middle of winter at -30? I don't think so. You'll be playing ice hockey, and that's where you don't have that national kind of player base, and not every university, um, again, has a field hockey program. Whereas in Europe, and in India and Pakistan, and in Australia and New Zealand, there is actually a strong player base. There is a strong university program. There are professional leagues. They're just not as well known as they should be. India and Pakistan is the national sport. You would think cricket. It's not. It's field hockey. Australia and New Zealand played at a very high level, and they have. And in Australia and New Zealand, it has to compete with rugby union, rugby league, AFL, motorsport. Other sports that have a bigger fan base and bigger TV deals. It has to compete, and they always produce quality players who play at the Olympics and Commonwealths and World Championships and World Cups. In Europe as well, very very popular, and it's partly to do with the way sports are organised because we have the club structure where the club is at the heart of the community, um, you know, and members make the club. It's not like a franchise system. And yeah, if you watch the Olympics, just watch the field hockey at the Olympics or the World Championships. There are clips on YouTube. I suggest you watch a senior professional or international match, and you will be stunned at the quality of play. The difference between high school level, university level is massive, and then when you get to proper elite level, you'll be blown away by it. But the fact you're watching at high school when you're giving it a go, you're watching at local level. I don't think there is the standard of play in the US and Canada that there is in Europe and Australia and New Zealand. It's not even close. Pakistan and India, not even close. Because of the popularity, Oh yeah, field hockey as well. They have a very strong university program with rugby union, field hockey, and cricket. Football or soccer, should I say, if you're from North America, is more of the native sport, as in the black community, whereas the whites and the mixed race and the Asian community in South Africa will play cricket, rugby union, and field hockey. Field hockey is very popular with the Indian South and Pakistani South Africans, whereas rugby union cricket is seen as the white Africana, the white sport, although those who are talented athletes from Soweto and the minority groups, black Africans, will play it. Well, actually, no. The South African field hockey program is reasonably strong. They do play at the Commonwealth. They do play at the Olympics. They're just not on the same level as India, Pakistan, the UK, Germany. The Canadians have a quite decent setup. They're not on the same standard as the tier one nations, as I'll call it, but they do have a pretty strong history within field hockey because of their university and their high school programs, which sport is a religion in South Africa. It doesn't matter what sport you play. It is, absolutely massive. It is a religion. It doesn't matter what sport you choose. You are seen as a hero to South African people. Whereas in the US, you've got your American football. We do. Well, Great Britain as a whole, the UK as a whole does. But yes, England is the strongest out of the four home nations when it comes. The Irish have a good. The Republic of Ireland has a good field hockey setup. Again, that's through the universities like Dublin and Cork and Limerick. It's through the university setup that they get all of their players. Um, but roller hockey's brilliant. I've got friends who play it. It's very roller hockey is very popular in Spain and Portugal. You would think they'll be brilliant, and it's a slightly different variant of roller hockey than what you would expect. But they do have a professional roller hockey league in Spain and Portugal, and they are really good at it, and it's actually really fun to watch if you can understand, Spanish or Portuguese commentary, which I had no idea what's going on. But the commentators always sound really happy and excited when anything happens, including the boring bits where there's no play. I love Latino commentators. I like watching football with Italian commentary. Um, I do. So if there's like an Italian broadcast that I managed to get hold of, I love watching it with the Italian commentary because it's brilliant. It is so fun. But what we're talking about though is how certain sports in certain parts of the world are more popular than other sports that you would expect. Hockey in stuff. Um, I mean, I've got friends. I mean, I played a bit of hockey. I was a goalie, so I didn't really do a lot of play of the ball. I just wore loads of body armor and shouted at people. Um, and you know, but roller hockey is something that in Spain and Portugal is very very popular. It's exceptionally popular. But a lot of the British ice hockey players learnt their skills playing roller hockey, which is amazing. Quite a few of the bees players well, quite a few of the GB current setup that we have with the national side learnt their skills playing roller hockey. Um, the inline roller hockey is what I'm talking about. Roller hockey itself is a bit like field hockey. That's very popular in Spain and Portugal. There is a professional league. It is an indoor league as well, so you can play all year round. And it is played quite a high standard, and they are very, very good, and it is really fun to watch. Inline roller hockey, inline hockey. I follow several teams on social media. I've seen, go on YouTube. It's pretty much a mix of lacrosse and ice hockey for brutality. Um, there is no holding back. The hits are just as hard, except you're not landing on ice, which has got a little bit of give in it. You're landing on pure concrete. It hurts, but it's so similar. And it's a great way to learn your skills in the summer when it is. You know, it's a great sport. I mean, I wish there was more outdoor venues to do it in the height of summer when the weather's good. Um, you know, and it should and that, I mean, that should get more exposure because that's brilliant. And a lot of the British players learn their skills playing. I can to a certain extent. It's just suited with rink ownership. I've got my views on the people who own the rink and the local council and the local government. Um, there's a whole lot of dodginess going on there. It is a massive shame, what happened. Now, Plague Doctor, I believe I know you. I believe I know you, which would be really interesting what your real name is, because I believe I know you. But um, frisbee golf, the Ultimate Frisbee Championship. Frisbee is just really popular. Just the Ultimate Frisbee Championship is very very popular. I've got friends who I've got loads of frisbees. Loads of my friends have got frisbees as well. We've had a great laugh, down the park playing. I first broke my nose in ice hockey with a frisbee 11 and a half years ago. I know that's the home of the Jets in Slough. I know it's a shame. Um, but at the same time, it's still in Berkshire. It's still reasonably local. They've merged their youth setups. The women's team is still playing as well, and the women's team produce like half the national side. Um, it's quite popular. The fact that a number of the national ice, the men's and women's ice hockey teams learnt their skills in the summer playing roller hockey, inline hockey. Um, oh, that's years ago. That's the old arena. That's the inside of. That's me and my mate Sam. I took my mate Sam with me and his then girlfriend, and that was my mate Sam's first game coming with me. He hadn't been since he was a kid, and I'm trying to think who you are, Plague Doctor. This is gonna be really annoying. Really annoying. you're either one of the Ely Newman brothers, which would be really annoying, really piss me off if you're one of the Ely Newman brothers. Jay. Oh, who is it? I know you. I know who you are. This is going to bug me now, Play Doctor. This is going to really bug me because I know a lot of, and I think you're Ben Ely Newman. I'm going for an XB's player. I'm going for an XB's player. I really am. Or my mate Lewis, just because it's Rob, isn't it? Please tell me it's Rob. Nope. Lisa? Trying to think who you are now, Plague Doctor. Sam is doing good. Sam is doing good. He's working back at the Maidenhead. Trying to think. Trying to think. It is Rob. How you doing, Rob? How you doing, man? I saw your photo of you taking your boys to the footy. Yeah, no, Sam's doing all right. He's back at the Maidenhead. He's had his teeth done, so he's got his dentures in now. Sam's doing all right. He just came back. He went to see the Cardiff Devils play because he was in Wales on holiday for a couple of weeks against the Panthers. And he goes every weekend to the Bees home games when he can because he works Saturdays and gets Sundays off. So yeah, he's been to a lot of games. He's keeping me updated. We're not having a good season, by the way. We're bottom of the league. We are doing so bad. Basingstoke have got a worse goal difference though. So when we play Basingstoke head to head, could be fun. And the Raiders aren't doing well either. So there's a few teams that have had a real shocking start. It is a shame. I mean, I can't get to Slough as easily as I would like because I'm not riding the motorbike at the moment, and I had a couple of bad pranks in the summer. But yeah, Sam's doing all right. I talk to him regularly. Probably give him yeah, we do suck. We do suck. We so suck. I've still got my hockey collection, my jersey collection. It's just in the cupboard at the moment, over there in the wardrobe. But yeah, no, it's good to see you, Rob. I mean, we'll have to catch up at some point. You'll have to come by the flat sometime if you can. I don't know where you're living at the moment, but you know, yeah, I can't get to Slough. I mean, I haven't seen them since they moved, which is a shame. But at the same time, I'm working all the time. I've got to be up at like 3:30 in the morning for work because my lift to work's got to isolate because his kids might have COVID. So I'll have to walk an hour and a half into work and then do a full 8 to 10 hours on the bins and then walk an hour and a half home. So I've got about an hour and a half walk to work, and there's a chance of snow this week, and I'm not looking forward to it. And I'm going to be by the time I get to work, I want to go to bed. No, I'm now in Finchampstead. I'm on the south side of Wokingham. Basically, I'm on 9 Mile Ride. I'm a stone's throw from the Traveller sites in Finchampstead. So I did their bins today. I live down the road from Pinewood. Yeah, I've moved out of Bracknell over a year ago. I haven't looked back. I mean, I was living in Maidenhead for a bit as well, but I haven't looked back moving out of Bracknell. I felt a lot happier. Yes, it means I haven't been able to go to the ice hockey, and yes, it means I haven't seen as many of my mates. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. You live in Pine Ridge Park Homes. I did your bins today. I did your bins today, mate. I was that bin lorry going around. You literally live 2 minutes away from me. I live the other side of the railway bridge. I literally live the other side of the railway bridge. On the double roundabout. I'm literally, if I'm looking that way, pointing, that's where you live. You live 2 minutes that way. I could walk to yours now if I really wanted to. Fuck. Oh, here's my new lighter, my new clipper lighter. It comes in a case. I didn't realise you'd moved back there. How long have you been living there for? Because I've literally emptied your bins this morning. Do you not? Were you working today? Oh, I don't drink anymore. I don't know about Rob. I don't drink anymore. Come round the flat, man. Don't know if you're at work right now, but I'm not going anywhere. You should come round the flat. It would actually be kind of nice to have like someone else to. Uh, 5 months. I've been here a year and a half. August last year, I moved in here. Beginning of August last year. So this will be my second Christmas in the flat, my second birthday in the flat. I haven't drunk since Easter. I haven't drunk since before my ex-girlfriend. So yeah, you should come over the flat, mate. Come over the flat. Message me on Facebook now on Messenger. Ah, fuck. Shit. That's what's happened to me. My lift, my work colleague who gives me a lift into work, he's got to isolate if his son tests positive. So for the minimum next 2 days, I've got to walk into work. But yeah, no, I mean, oh well, my mate Sam wants to do one as well, and yeah, that's my mate Sam on the ice hockey videos. He gets his ugly mug in there. I think there's some photos at the ice hockey of me, Sam, and Rob doing some crazy stuff. Oh dear. So my mate Sam is the one in the video pokes his head, going hello. My mate Rob, there was I forget if it was you or Jamie I was with, and this is if you're a yes, we would. You're a Senators fan. I'm a Jets fan. We've lost three in a row. Ugh, we lost to Vancouver. Oh, I feel dirty. Um, you're a Senators fan. You all have the whole Senators about COVID protocols, and you're not having a good season. We're top of the Central. Don't know how. I don't know how we fixed that, but St. Louis have fallen apart. Minnesota have started to lose games, so the Central's looking a tough division now. We've won 9, but we've lost 4 in overtime. I don't know how we're doing that. And this road trip, I mean, the Everton game was like playoff hockey. The 2 Everton games were like playoff hockey. We battered them 5-2. And just because their power plays are nearly 100%, how that is even possible this stage in the season. Yeah, I don't know how the Oilers' power play is insane. There is no way they can keep it up about 80%. And that's what did us in the first game is we won. We were thrashing them. We had shut down McDavid. We had shut down Draisaitl. Ryan Hopkins was their best player. And then out of nowhere, Draisaitl scores 2 power play goals. And I'm just like, how? And then, yeah, Fulham are doing quite well in the in the championship. As a Blackburn fan, we're on the edge of the playoffs, so I'm not overly concerned because we haven't hit the festive period yet. Sam's happy because Chelsea are doing well, really well. And so, all in all, football-wise, the clubs we support are actually having decent seasons. My neighbour Adam is now having a bit of a meltdown over the Man United situation. But 1 goal scored, and you know, 7. They scored 1 goal against Watford, and they conceded 5 against Liverpool, 2 against Man City, which makes 7. 11 goals they've conceded for 1 goal scored. So, you know, Man United are in trouble, and it's twofold. It's defensively and it's up front. And the Ronaldo transfer hasn't worked. Bringing Ronaldo back to Man United hasn't worked. People go, oh, but he saved their skin so many times in the last minute of games. For the previous 85 minutes, he's not been there. So they're playing him in the wrong position. You know, Van der Beek is not flourishing. The defence is shambles. As Matic is knackered in midfield because he's got to do all the work. Yeah, I don't really do much. I mean, I've got a date this weekend. Yes, I have a lady friend. Oh, there, your daughter chose Spurs. Tell her to seek counselling as soon as possible. Because I don't know how Conte's going to do at Spurs, but he's going to face the same issues that Mourinho faced, Nuno faced, and Pochettino faced, and it's going to come down to transfers. They've got to, again, Spurs, same as Man United, they're living off past glories, haven't got any direction. He's only played a couple of games. They've only played a couple of games, the international break and such. He's barely had time to really stamp his authority on the team. Let's see how they do over the festive period. Let's see what happens with transfer market. Let's see where they're at the end of this current season. I think that'll be a good barometer to see where they're at. Um, Turn to support Brentford. Brentford, far better choice. Far better choice than Chelsea. Far more family orientated club. And you won't get lynched at Brentford, being a Fulham fan. I'm a Chelsea fan. You'll live. Um, the Spurs women's team isn't quite up to scratch either. With the money that the club actually has at their disposal with the ownership is exceptionally wealthy. Me mate's brother's a Brentford fan. um, no, I like what Brentford have done, and they didn't expect Premier League when the current ownership. They were slow and steady in their preparation for the Premier League. They made sure they upgraded their stadium. They invested in the coach and the setup with the player recruitment, player development. They've got like a third of the Danish side for Christ's sake, and that Danish national team are doing really well. So they've been very, very good in scouting, player development, right team culture, right direction for the team. Um, so the Brentford setup is really good. I think they're going to be a stable Premier League team for many years to come because they've got the right culture, the right direction. They're not overextending themselves financially. They've done really good scouting, um, and therefore they're in a very healthy position. Whereas Norwich have become a yo-yo club, Newcastle have become a yo-yo club, West Brom they've not stabilised themselves when they get to that next league. That was due to Nuno and the ownership. There's a lot of good Portuguese players, but they've got to invest in their youth setup because the West Midlands is a football hotbed. Um, it is, and now Leicester in the East Midlands as is doing better than the whole West Midlands combined. Um, uh, well, that's interesting. Now, you're new to the sport. You want to pick a team. You're obviously new to European football. If you want to pick a team that has passion and doesn't necessarily play in the Premier League, Atalanta. There's a team that plays with passion, energy, and is always the underdog because they've got Inter and AC Milan in Milan. They play in Bergamo. It's the second city in Lombardy in northern Italy. They are the forgotten team of northern Italy. You're going to pick a team, pick Atalanta, and watch some Italian football. The Atalanta style is high energy, high press, um, good teamwork, good team culture. They have that little chip on their shoulder because they're classed as the underdog, and they're not, and they're doing really well in Italian football. They play well in the Champions League. They play well in Serie A, and I've liked Atalanta for 2 decades. I've always had a soft spot for Atalanta. Um, you know, um, and it goes because they're a cult club, are Atalanta. Oh yeah, Ladea. That's the nickname is Ladea. It's Diana, the Greek goddess of hunting, or Nike. Well, Diana is the Roman goddess of hunting. Nike is the Greek goddess of hunting. Every time a baby is born in Bergamo, the club will send the family baby supplies and will automatically sign that baby up as a club member. So the whole city basically owns the football club. It's amazing. Um, um, yeah, but the first game I watched on TV was a Blackburn game, and I followed them since I was 3 years old. I haven't looked back. Good and bad, I haven't looked back. And we've had some real tough times. Painful being a Blackburn fan, it really is painful. But I understand what you're saying with Spurs lacking passion and lacking drive. There is no passion at that club. The players don't show enough on the field. Um, there is no energy, it seems. And you look at other teams like Leicester, like Chelsea, Arsenal have a bit of passion about them, to be fair, in the past. I shall let you jump on stream with me sometime. But yeah, like the the when I've seen Spurs play in the FA Cup, the semi final against Man United a couple of years ago, but Man United ended up playing Chelsea in the final. I think it was in 2018 or 2019. Um, you know, there was no passion. They were the first 20 minutes. They were passing and moving brilliantly. Their energy was brilliant, but there was no player like putting in that stiff tackle and giving that energy level, that rise to the team. And then Man United turn it around, up their game, and you know, uh, it just went away from them. And that's the story of. I mean, that the Champions League final against Liverpool, which was a shocking final. Let's not disguise the fact that was one of the worst Champions League finals I've ever seen. I fell asleep actually. There was nothing in their game. There was no energy. There was not one player wanted to like grab the game by the scruff of the neck and go on a mazy run, for example, or a centre back like Vermaelen, for example. Not Vermaelen. Who's the centre back? Who is the centre back? Dutch, uh, um, Belgian centre back. I forgot his name now. Vertonghen. There you go. If Jan Vertonghen goes in and smashes the centre forward, let's say Mo Salah, just flattens him or takes out Firmino, it doesn't matter if it's a foul or not, but just goes in with a robust challenge, that can actually raise your team because you're getting physical. None of that. And they just seem listless. And that is a problem. There's no motivators in that dressing room. For me, I think it's a divided dressing room. I think it has been for quite some time. Uh, you look at teams in like the mid-table, and they've got more. Like West Ham is just a team. Like Mark Noble is just passion personified. He's your stereotypical, solid, not outstanding, energy guy. He is addressing. There's a reason why he's West Ham's captain. The guy is a machine. He will run for 90 minutes. He will put in, even if he's having a bad game, he will still put in that one or two physical challenges. He will shout at his teammates. I mean, there was a couple of pitch invasions once. He beat the crap out of them on the pitch and throw him off the pitch. I mean, that is, you know, Mark Noble. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's a poor man's Roy Keane is the best way to describe Mark Noble. But I would rather have 11 Mark Nobles in my side than one Harry Kane. Because when I'm watching sport, the teams that I like to follow, the players that I like, are always those passion energy guys. You know, and so when I do my like that Muzzy Izzet video, I did ex Leicester City player. That was a guy who played with a lot of energy. He wasn't the most skillful. He wasn't necessarily the most talented, but he played alongside Neil Lennon, another passionate guy. I would much rather have a midfield three of Lennon, Savage, and Izzet over what Man United have or what Spurs have. You know why? Because all three of them will put in vicious challenges and make sure they hurt the player. And from dead balls and open play, they can create. And Robbie Savage would break up the play. Neil Lennon will pick the pass, and Muzzy Izzet would make the run. And they worked very good in a midfield three. And they were part of the reason why Leicester won 2 League Cups. Is because their energy in midfield and made 3 League Cup finals almost in a row. There was a period where it was just Leicester was the League Cup team. My thoughts on Pochettino. Well, there was a lot of speculation and reports coming out of Paris that he's not happy with the position he's in, with Leonardo being the director of football and having too much say over transfers and scouting and player development, and all he's told to do is coach the first team. So there is a breakdown in the relationship there. Same with Tuchel. There's a reason why Tuchel left PSG. And the same things keep coming out about managers who are at PSG. They dominate the French league, fall apart in the Champions League, and last season I think summed up Poch's first season, where they in previous years were running away with the French league, and then last year they lose it by a point on the last day of the season. They were constantly in a battle, and while Poch won the French version of the Charity Shield and the French Cup, the league didn't win, and Champions League weren't in the final. And that means their team has taken a step back. Now, this season, they're 11 points clear. That's fine. You know, you've had but Messi isn't scoring. And it'll be interesting to see Sergio Ramos, play tonight in his first game. And he's come back from a long-term injury problem. How he does in the centre of defence. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with an ex-Barcelona player up front and an ex-Real Madrid player in the centre of defence. That'll be really interesting how that dynamic works. because for many years they were going toe to toe in La Liga, kicking lumps out of each other. So Pochettino failed at Tottenham. He failed at Tottenham. They came close to winning the Premier League, the League Cup, and the Champions League, and fouled up all three. And they also came close to winning the FA Cup. Every trophy that Tottenham were in the running for, they came up short. And then Poch's first season, in competitions that PSG have been dominating, so the League and the League Cup and the FA Cup in France, can't win them. Can't win them. And that, you know, I think, and there's been question marks over, he's dealing with big egos at Tottenham and how he lost the dressing room. And this Man United team have basically, there needs to be a massive clear out of that dressing room, because the same problems that Poch had at Tottenham, he's going to face bigger problems at Man United where there's higher expectation. There's almost an expectancy of you have to win a trophy. If Zidane has raised questions about Man United and their structures. It's been reported that the structural issues at Man United have put Zidane off, because that is a complete rebuild job. A complete rebuild job. Now, if we're talking about this being a North American sport, so my mate Rob, who's played Doctor, he's an Ottawa Senators fan. You rebuild. You have time to rebuild with draft picks, trades. It's no relegation, so you can be terrible for a couple of seasons and get away with it, because you can get youth prospects, you can get trades in, you can start rebuilding on the hop, and then you can become competitive again. In a promotion relegation system, you don't have that opportunity, because if Man United miss out on Europe, and if Man United slip down the league and do an Arsenal, for example, right? See what I'm getting at here, where Arsenal Man United was so dominant for so long with two very dominant managers. Yeah, but Zidane failed with dealing with the egos, including Sergio Ramos at Real Madrid. There's a reason why Zidane quit twice. He quit twice. And he had an issue dealing with the personalities in the dressing room. Hence the reason why he was, I'm walking away from this mess. And while he already had the assets at his disposal to do what he wanted to do, which he did, he didn't have to add too much because they were just stacked. It'd be interesting if Zidane had to go and start from a lesser base where he has to identify talent, bring it in, nurture it, grow it, and then go up the league table, which is what he would have to do at Man United. He would have to actually work harder to get to the same level that PSG being dominant in France, or Real Madrid being one of the top three clubs in Spain constantly, with Atletico and Barcelona for many, many years. It's a complete flip, if you understand. This is why Guardiola, as well. People go, "Oh, he's one of the greatest of all time with all his Champions League wins and league wins and all that." And I'm thinking to myself, but he's already inherited a team that's already stacked and solid. Stacked and solid. There's not a lot you really have to do. And some of the Guardiola transfers are leaving you scratching your head going, well, now they're hurting the team all these years down the line. So, while Zidane and Pep, when they took over their respective clubs, they took over stacked teams. When I say stacked teams, the talent was there. So it'd be interesting if, Pep, for example, God, loads of stuff going on. I've got loads of messages here. It'll be the same with Pep. You take Pep away from money, Mourinho is coached with a lot less money and a lot less funds available. And actually, while he did inherit Ranieri's team at Chelsea, he still added to that team constantly while he was there and in the second spell. So when Mourinho's gone, he's always sought to add to it and build a platform with the existing core, plus adding bits around and moving the pieces. Whereas Pep, it's like you would expect the Man City youth system to be pretty red hot by now. It isn't. It isn't. Foden notwithstanding, and a couple other young players coming through. Since the money's been at City, Mika Richards is the other, big name player to come through. Oh yeah, Pep wants the Spanish job when he's a Catalan independence voter. It's going to go down well with the rest of the Spanish fans. It's like putting the head of ETA in charge of the Spanish government, for Christ's sake. Basically, Pep wants to go where the money is. He doesn't want to have to build from scratch, so to speak. And there have been ex-players who played for Guardiola who are not as complimentary about him. Yaya Toure goes, he wants players just to, be very meek and go, yes, sir, and not have to deal with a player going, actually, coach, I think we should do this differently. And his style of football, tiki-taka, has now been undone. So he's having to adapt, but he doesn't play with a centre forward, which is a problem. Because you need that plan B or plan C when, as Liverpool have proven, and Wigan proved in the FA Cup a few years ago, when Will Gregg scored that goal, it's all well and good having 70% possession. Their shooting percentage is too low. Ironically, for a team that scores record goals, just imagine if their shooting percentage was higher. Right? Just imagine if the shooting percentage was higher. Okay? Just imagine that. Champions League final was outcoached by Tuchel. Mourinho's beaten Pep in a final as well. So while Pep has had stacked teams, two managers have beaten him in cup finals, and they play a slightly more defensive counter-attack style of game. Klopp proved that you can beat City and beat them heavily in the league. That I think it was the 4-3 where Liverpool 4-1 up, but then there was a few defensive lapses. But basically, for 75 minutes, Man City just were nowhere. They couldn't get their flow together. If you shut down two of their creative players, just two of them, that's all you need to shut down. It's not every creative player, just two. It disrupts the balance of the team, and there is no plan B. Pep doesn't have a plan B. His plan A is to pass you off the pitch and just, make you chase the ball. But if you've got an organised defence and a very fit team, so well drilled, organised, they know their roles, they're not going to rush into challenges, they're not going to break that organisation. Guess what? You get undone. And Klopp at Borussia Dortmund, the year before Pep goes to Bayern, had Bayern on the ropes in that Champions League final. And this is when Pep still at Barcelona, or when he took his year out. And Klopp's methods, much like Southampton with Hussein Hartel, their style actually disrupts City. If Liverpool got their top team on the field versus City's top team, Liverpool will win. If Liverpool got a few injuries and City have got a few injuries, Liverpool's depth's a little bit less. City have a better chance, and yes, they've got the one final since they've had the money, and I think two semi-finals, and one of them wasn't under Pep, and they just can't do it. And I think, looking at the league this season, other teams are past them, and other teams are challenging them for where they are. Now, the top five is a very interesting race right now, and we haven't hit the festive period. Leicester have had a slow start. West Ham are playing really well. And when you've got teams like Arsenal, Tottenham, and Man United not doing so well, no, Spurs should not have a Champions League. The fact they got to that final made me chuckle. They can't even win the Europa League. The Europa Conference League they're struggling in. Trust me, they don't deserve a Champions League title. Please, calm yourself. Calm yourself, Rob. Calm yourself. Have a cup of tea. Have a cup of herb tea. Herb tea. I look at it because the team isn't balanced enough. They actually play better without Harry Kane on the side. Harry Kane plays better for England than he does for Tottenham. Europa League, yes, I watched that final in a strip club. I was in a titty bar at the time watching that on the big screen. Because I was surrounded by tits, but I was watching tits on the TV. I was actually in a strip club that had it on the TV because they also had obviously the late night music license. They can have live sport as well. So I was in I was in. Well, with Harry Kane, it's an interesting one. It'll be interesting if Conte can get him to buy into what he wants to do and um, how he wants to play the game. It'd be very interesting because Mourinho going, Kane was like, I want to leave. I'm done. I'm done. Nuno coming in, Nuno was like, look, this is how we play. We play rigid defence, flowing counter attack, which you would think would suit Harry Kane, didn't it? Conte will not shy. I mean, Conte managed to get players who were struggling at Chelsea playing better. He went to Inter, got players playing better. Players that had been discarded from other clubs. He got them playing. So Conte will improve the quality and fitness of players. He will. He will also won't be afraid to go to like other clubs and go, I've coached this guy before. He's a bit out of form, but I know what that particular player, fully fit, fully motivated, is capable of. Now he's set up teams to play against Harry Kane. That's what's interesting. He knows how teams should defend Harry Kane and Son and the Tottenham midfield, which will put him in a better position to go, right, this is how we stopped you from playing against us, be it at Chelsea. I don't know if Tottenham played Inter in the Champions League, but Conte will know from his time at Chelsea how to stop Tottenham. So in that regard, he knows how to get Tottenham playing because he knows how Tottenham have been set up in previous years, how to shut them down. That is what is key here, is Conte has coached a rival club in the Premier League and has won success in said competitions, including the FA Cup, where Tottenham blew it in the semi-final. He would have watched the footage of that and that Man United response in order to put Hazard, set up as he did on the field against Man United. So, Conte will definitely know how to improve Tottenham because he shut them down in the league in the league with Chelsea. Now, if that means Harry Kane's got to go, and a more mobile, quicker centre forward or a centre forward pairing up front has to come in, and Son played really well without Kane at the beginning of the season. That's what was noticeable, is Tottenham played better without Harry Kane at the beginning of the season. So, does that mean with the players that Tottenham have right now, plus what Conte wants to add in January and in the summer, does that mean Kane has to leave? I would say yes. The midfield isn't strong enough. The depth isn't there. He's going to want to add depth. He will probably look at Chelsea and Inter and go, right, I've coached these players, and possibly Juventus as well. Certain players at the clubs that Conte's been at will go, right, okay, I'll bring in a veteran, and I know this youth setup. I know this younger player who was in the youth setup at said club. Let's bring him in as well. Let's mix things up by bringing in players from Chelsea and from Inter, possibly from Juventus. These are three clubs Conte's coached at with great success. Bring them in. So I think that's what the current Tottenham squad have to be playing for their positions right now. They have to be playing out their skins for him right now because he will not. He's the type of guy who won't tolerate shirkers. He is a commitment guy. He doesn't tolerate players not putting their weight. He doesn't tolerate players not putting effort in, not trying. If you with Conte are a bit out of form and lacking a bit of confidence, but you're trying for 90 minutes, he'll pick you. He will give you confidence. He'll put you on the bench if you're, he'll rotate you if he has to, but he'll have you in his plans. Much like, certain managers demand defensive stability. People criticise Big Sam and Steve Bruce, right? But these were hard-nosed centre-backs. And while they're not the most expansive when it comes to their style of play, they expect every outfield player to put a shift in, right? They expect players to have energy and passion. And this is one. Not necessarily. There's a few players that I think, because Spurs are in a bad position right now and not really threatening the league this year, Chelsea might. Tuchel might go, this guy's surplus. This guy, we need, and Abramovich always wants to make money. And Conte has been told they'll have money to spend, which I find ridiculous because they didn't want to sign. The talks broke down in the summer over transfer policy apparently, and the coaching structure. And Conte wants to overhaul the scouting, youth development, and the medical side of things at Tottenham. Same as Xavi at Barcelona, he sacked all the Barcelona medical staff. Honestly, I wouldn't say he's 18. Get rid of him. I would try and keep hold of some of the young players to build a core around to go into the future, because this is what gets me about a lot of football clubs. They sell off their young talent, and then that young talent goes to a rival club and ends up biting them in the arse when they are let go. I would try and keep him to stay. If he wants to go, then he wants to go. Then his attitude's in the wrong place, because he's more likely to get first team football at Fulham than at a rival club, and that's why a lot of young players, But Tammy Abraham, I think his agent said, look, you're more likely to get regular first team football, and you're playing for a manager in Mourinho who's worked with him before. That's the difference between Tammy Abraham. Mourinho was there when he was in the youth setup, breaking into the first team. He's got a relationship with Mourinho. Bang, take him. Whereas Arsenal doesn't have the relationship with Arteta. There's no one on the playing group apart from, I think, David Luiz still playing for Arsenal? Who would have had a playing relationship with Tammy Abraham. Mourinho's got that connection, and while that's there, the agent would go, look, this is a better option for you, and it's the agents that are the ones who make things happen. And the player does have a fair bit of feedback going, I'll go with Mourinho. I was given my chance with Mourinho. I'll go with him. Simple. And obviously Conte, Tuchel is a hard taskmaster like Conte, and Tammy Abraham. Watching those two World Cup qualifiers, he missed a lot of chances and didn't look 100%. He got his goal against San Marino, but against Albania, we could have had 10. Second half, he just didn't quite look in tune with the rest of the team going forward, and the style of play that he want to play. And his shooting percentage, much like Sterling, is far too low. FSG. Wow. Well, I know Mario Lemieux, obviously player and owner, has saved the team as a player and as an owner. But the Penguins do operate on very, very slim margins, and if they miss the playoffs, they make a loss. Fenway Sports Group, that's going to go down like a sack of shit, considering they're from Boston and they own the Red Sox. That will go down like a sack of shit. It will, because they're Boston based and they own the Red Sox. That will go down really badly in Pittsburgh, really badly. That will go down really badly with the Penguins fan base. If you can't get the fan base on side, you've got a massive problem in Pennsylvania. Same with the Flyers. Really passionate fans. It's blue collar country, and we're talking about proper blue collar, mining country, Rust Belt. Look what's happened with the Senators with Melnick. Fans hate him. They're not happy with the fact that he always cheaps out on contracts and players, and their good players leave. I'm not sure the Penguins fans will be happy with Fenway Sports Group, because Fenway Park, is the home of the Boston Red Sox, basically. I'm not so sure how happy the fan base will be with that. And don't get me wrong, they know their sports franchises, they know their sports, teams, but I would not be surprised if the fan base are not happy with that. And Mario Lemieux, while he's a French Canadian, I tell you now, he is a Pittsburgh Penguin at heart, and I think he would think long and hard about that offer. Considering, yes, the Penguins do operate on very slim margins, they really do. And when he bought the team, they were the worst team in the league. They were on the verge of going bankrupt, being relocated. I'm not so sure. I think the fans. Crosby is only on 8.7 million a year, so that I'm not. I mean, look, the fact that they own the Boston Red Sox won't go down. Won't go down. It's like Howard Ballard with the Maple Leafs. He was so controversial, and the fans just had enough. They were glad when he moved on. Um, it's a difficult one. Bad ownership or the wrong ownership can really affect how the team plays as well. Now, Liverpool and the Boston Red Sox is a license to print money because they're very profitable, successful teams. Very profitable, very successful, global brands, well known. The Red Sox are the second most well known team in Major League Baseball after the Yankees. It's a license to print money. The Penguins, outside of hockey fans, I think there was that Van Damme film at the same time. I think do Fenway Sports Group own the Celtics in Boston? Boston Celtics? I think they do. I'll have to check on the Fenway Sports Group. I'm actually going to check on the Fenway Sports Group right now. That's really interested me. Um, let's have a look at the Fenway Sports Group. I'm just interested because I own the Boston Celtics. It'd be weird if they didn't own the Boston Celtics. So Fenway Sports Group. Here we go. Let's see who they own. They are interested, in buying the Penguins. FSG. Let's get rid of that. Well, they own the Red Sox. Right. No. What have I done? I've done something. My phone's gone a bit. Fenway Sports Group. Oh, they actually are getting closer to a takeover. That's going to be interesting. That is going to be very interesting because they're worth $6 billion. They do own Boston Red Sox and Liverpool. What else? Who else do they own? Okay, Boston Red Sox, Liverpool Football Club. They own Fenway Park. They own Anfield. They own a NASCAR team, Roush Racing. They own the subsidiary, the minor league affiliate, the Worcester Red Sox, the Salem Red Sox, Fenway Sports, New England Sports Network. So they own the network that covers the Bruins games. And Patriots games, even though they don't actually have any active interest in those sports. Wow. Okay. Yeah, they don't own the Celtics, so they own no one else. They own a few minor league affiliates of the Red Sox. They own the Red Sox brand. They own a NASCAR team with Brad Keselowski. They own 50% of Brad Bosch. Roush Fenway. Yes, they own a NASCAR team with Brad Keselowski in the Infinity Series or the Truck Series. They own a NASCAR team, 50% owners. Yeah, with Brad Keselowski. Bet you didn't know that, did you? Boston Celtics. Let's see who owns the Boston Celtics. I know they don't own the Bruins, but they own the TV networks that host the Bruins and the Patriots games. New England Sports Network, NESN. Who owns these guys? Boston Celtics. They play at the TD Garden. Owners. Ownership. Wyke Grousbeck. There you go. And the main Celtics are their affiliate team. So let's have a look at this. Wyke Grousbeck. What a name. Wyke. No, the Bruins, their ownership ain't going to change hands. Their ownership is known also for cheaping out contracts, which has annoyed many. Let's have a look. Let's have a look who owns the Bruins. Delaware North Companies, Jeremy Jacobs and Charlie Jacobs. So Delaware North is a global food service and hospitality. Their owners are from Buffalo. I mean, you couldn't make this up. They're not even from Boston. That's Jeremy Jacobs. Jacobs, father and son. He's the current chairman of the NHL Board of Governors, Jeremy Jacobs. He's known as an arsehole, by the way. He owns the Boston Bruins, and he used to own the Cincinnati Royals in the Major League Baseball, who are now the Sacramento Kings. Weird that, isn't it? So they're owned by the Jacobs family. Charlie Jacobs is his son. Right. So what other sport? Venki. Yeah, don't even get me started on the Venkis, please. It's been 12 years of suffering. Please make it stop. How they put. I mean, we obviously English football has the fit and proper persons test and financial fair play, and we're lucky not to be docked points by the Football League for having losses greater than 135% of earnings or something. Like Reading and Derby County, we are very lucky not to have points deducted. Don't even get me started on the amount of debt we have. We are in serious trouble. Don't get me started. It's frustrating. We didn't. No, they just made the blue slightly lighter. They didn't change the club's actual kit or colours. They just made blue slightly lighter from dark blue to light blue, and that's gone down. I don't like the current kit. I don't like the colour blue. It's got to be a dark blue. And I will get my Blackburn shirt out at some point wearing a live stream, and you can see what I mean with dark blue. And that jersey's from a couple before the Venkies took over, so I know what I'm. Talking. They didn't change the club colours. They just changed the tone of blue. That's it. That is it. It's just a slightly lighter blue, which we have played with in the past. So, but I'm not so keen on the colour. I'm trying to think. They're not the worst owners ever. I can tell you that for a fact. There are worse club owners out there. Derby are in serious trouble. Although a takeover is imminent, but they're relegated. They are good as relegated, in my opinion. They're on -3 points. They were actually off the bottom, pretty much. They'd actually got themselves competitive enough to actually have closed the gap. And the way they were playing, I think. Oh, Cardiff, yeah, no, blue to red, that went down like an absolute turd. That went down, and then the fans never got on board, like ever got on board with that. And I just don't know. I just honestly, it's a weird one. I mean, what year was my 94 to 96 when we had the McEwen's Lager sponsorship and the collar with the little red V in the middle. Admittedly, obviously, it's the Premier League winning kit. My second favourite kit is the League Cup winning kit when we were sponsored by Kappa, because that was a real nice kit. I was very fond of that kit as well. But overall, I don't really have a yeah, the Hull owner. I mean, look, it's like MK Dons, the old AFC Wimbledon, when the owner just went, "I'll do it the American way and just move the team." Ugh. And then the AFC Wimbledon fans were like, "We'll set up our own team anyway," and they stopped going to games. It's like FC United and Manchester, with the Glazers, and they went back to the original Newton Heath colours. It's originally, and then they went to red. The Premier League winning 90s with the black stripe down the shorts. You have to be very, very careful when you push the fan base to a point where they will either set up their own club or they turn away from the team and boycott, because some fan bases are stupidly loyal. When you start pissing off loyal fan bases, it's one of them. Like, yeah, the Hull owners, that I don't like it when, like, the Leeds attempt to change the crest. It's like fans are like, "What are you guys doing?" Like, you obviously don't listen to what we want. Respect the history of the team. You know, it's just one of them. And when you have lunatic owners, like, yeah, some split the Venkus are far from the worst club owners in history. They're clueless. They've got better. They've decided to get better as time has gone on. They've learnt their lessons. It took a very, very long time, but I believe they'll sell. Personally, they know they're not popular. They know that in order to keep us happy, just leave the football side of things to football people. Um, um, there's a reason why we've stagnated in Championship and can't take that next step. Um, you've got competitive FIFA. Oh, don't worry, I've got to sort out my dinner. I've got to be up 3:30 in the morning, so I won't be on for much longer. Well, so I'm not a big fan of the current Man City logo. I like the old. I like the old one, which is like basically the opposite of what Man United is with the ship, which represents the Manchester Liverpool Canal. Um, the I'm not a massive fan of the current Man City logo. The current Wigan Athletic one looks a bit corporatey crap. The current Chelsea one, I'm not keen on that. I like the old Chelsea Football Club with the lion, very similar to Millwall. Um, that's the Chelsea logo I grew up with watching. I've got mates with Chelsea fans who still wear their old auto glass kits with Viali on the back and Di Matteo and Zola, what I call the glory years. But that was an Abramovich decision. Um, on yeah, there are just certain logos you just don't touch because they're iconic. Um, but it is what it is. Like I look at some of the owners of like Major League Baseball teams and NFL teams and NHL teams. There are some right there in the history books. There have been some right lunatic owners who make some of the bad football ownership that we have in Europe look pretty tame, like really tame. Um, uh, you couldn't make this up. Um, he was a really crazy owner. Yeah, Howard Ballard for the Maple Leafs. He was an absolute just lunatic. The guy who had the California Seals, or what were the Golden Seals, he was a bit touched. Um, just read the history of the California Seals, Golden Seals franchise. It's hilarious. It's so bad. Uh, yeah, but the logo they had before was also pre-Premier League era as well. It's just I'm not sold on the genericness because we're going to have a very similar logo, kind of with the circle with the writing in it. Chelsea have got a very similar logo. If you think about it, they're all very generic. There's no passion to it. There's no uniqueness to it. Um, the New York Rangers. Bring back Lady Liberty. Bring back the Lady Liberty. Same with the Washington Capitals with the Screaming Eagle. Bring that back. Bring it back. Arizona went, we'll bring back the Kachina because that's a cult thing. And it's the most popular NHL jersey on sale right now. It's the Kachina. They're almost impossible to get hold of. They go for stupid money on eBay. I can't even get hold of a CCM Kachina. I really want one. I want a Shane Jones Kachina original because they are damn near impossible to get your hands on. Yeah, Dan Schneider, he's known to be the Aquilinis in Vancouver are known to be Eugene Melnick's pretty bad. Pretty bad is an understatement. Thankfully, like leagues like the MLS don't have these lunatic owners, whereas the NHL's had its fair history. The NFL has got some really, yeah. Dan Schneider is absolutely just not right in the head. Um, there are some bad owners, really bad owners. Least successful team in NHL history. The original Jets Coyotes franchise is pretty diabolical. Pretty diabolical. Vancouver is just a mess from the year it enters till now. Even though they've got 3 Stanley Cup final appearances in there, they have constantly changed their. They had sticking rink, they had the flying V, they had the skate in the puck, they've had the orca in various styles. They rioted in '94 and 2011 when they lost the Stanley Cup final. Especially 2011, they just burnt the city down and went, "Oh, we'll just smash up the city centre and cause like $1.8 billion in damages." Um, the, the no, because you got they've been to a Stanley Cup final and their history is a lot shorter, but their first season was diabolical. The Washington Capitals has the worst record in NHL history with 8 wins on the season. No, the Panthers have been to the Stanley Cup final in 1996. That's where the rats on the ice comes from when they make the playoffs. They haven't been past the first round since. Trying to think of some really bad teams now, and it's getting harder because all the Canadian teams have either been to a conference final or a Stanley Cup final. All of them. The Jets have only been a team in Canada since 2011, and they've been a team for 22 years. And Atlanta doesn't count because it was just horrific. We don't want that history. Please, we don't want that history. Please, we're begging you. Can we erase the Atlanta Thrashers from the history books? There are no players currently on the roster right now, apart from Brian Little, who are ex-Thrashers players. Can we please erase that bit of our history forevermore? We are begging the NHL just to lose, 12 years of our history. That's the original Senators. That's not the current Senators. The original Senators went out of business during the Great Depression. But Ottawa as a city does have a rich history with ice hockey in general, so there's no issues there. The Minnesota North Stars, Dallas Stars have won a Stanley Cup and they've been to a couple of the Stanley Cup finals, but they were a pretty horrific franchise. San Jose Sharks, one Stanley Cup final appearance, quite a few deep playoff runs, but I'm trying to think of some really bad teams now. The New Jersey Devils, before they won their first Stanley Cup, were absolutely woeful. They have been moved 3 times as a franchise. Calgary Flames have won 1 Stanley Cup, but otherwise have been to 2 Stanley Cup finals, but otherwise, apart from the 80s, were pretty bad. No, seriously, Calgary were pretty bad. Edmonton, before the NHL and the WHA, and since 1990, have had 1 Stanley Cup final appearance and have been a tire fire. Buffalo have been horrific their entire history, although there has been a couple of Stanley Cup final appearances in there. Seattle have only just started, but they're standard expansion team. I'm trying to think of some really bad teams now. The Islanders, apart from the early 80s, before and after, were shit. The Rangers had the longest Stanley Cup drought until 94. Absolutely shocking, Seattle. Absolutely shocking, yeah. I wouldn't say it shouldn't really count because some teams founded after 95 have actually won the Stanley Cup and been to Stanley Cup finals and conference finals. I would say it's a toss-up between Arizona and the Jets, as in they've never been to the Stanley Cup final. That's something to note. I'm trying to think now. Carolina's got a pretty bad history when they were the Hartford Whalers, and they were so bad. So bad. I'm trying to think. You're actually making it really difficult because apart from Seattle, who we don't count because they've just joined the league, every other team apart from Arizona and Winnipeg have been to the Stanley Cup final at least once. At least once. No, the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis Grizzlies are absolutely hopeless. At least the Clippers have tried. And Sacramento. No, Sacramento are pretty bad. But I would say that the LA Clippers have tried. They just play in a market which has, well, the LA Lakers in it. So you're gonna Minnesota. Just Minnesota in sports, really. Let's not kid ourselves. Minnesota in sports are just absolutely painful. Phoenix Suns are quite bad as well. I'm not even being harsh. I'm just being honest. There are some teams that just shouldn't exist ever. It's hard because I don't follow the NBA really. I'm not overly passionate about the NBA, and the Memphis Grizzlies have to be the worst team. Just end the subject there. The Grizzlies are the worst team. Change my mind. I hate bagging on teams. I really do. I really honestly do hate bagging on teams. Before this channel, I would just slag off teams left, right, and centre. But I have learned that in the last 4.5 years that it's not fair to bag on teams because it's not the fans' fault the team sucks. It's down to ownership. It's down to player recruitment, player development, coaching, scouting. The culture within that organisation. There's a lot of reasons why a team sucks and is consecutively poor. So like Buffalo Sabres and the Coyotes are just crap. although the Coyotes have actually won several games in a row and are actually looking quite good right now. If on the last few games, they actually fight. At least the Coyotes have fight. The Sabres just, I don't know what to make of the Buffalo Sabres. There has to come a point where the fan base, which is stupidly loyal in the Ontario, New York, Niagara area, because they got an equal fan base north and south of the border. There has to come a point where the Sabres fans go, enough is enough. Like, please, we have been so bad for 22 years. Just please make the pain stop. Um, the Buffalo Bills. Um, yeah, Gold Coast. I don't know. I mean, the current Titans are looking quite promising over the last couple of seasons with the current ownership, the current coaching setup, the current recruitment. So right now, the Titans are looking good going forward, and that's me being honest. I think they actually do have a very bright future. They've got the right balance in the team. They've got young talents, experienced players there. Justin Holbrook is a winning coach, admittedly in Super League. They've got the right culture going now. They've got this no dickhead policy now. They do have some. Like Jayden Campbell looks like a superstar, just waiting to be unleashed. He really impressed me when he had his brief cameos last season. AJ Brimson looks pretty good as well. The forward pack looks immense. They've got a forward pack now. They've got Mal Meninga involved with the team. They've got Gordon Tallis involved with the team in growing the player base and in attracting players to the club. They've suddenly got good with their youth policy as well. Their youth development is paying off. They're no longer the basket case. That's now the West Tigers. The West Tigers is now the tire fire in the NRL. The reasons why Gold Coast didn't work before is partly to do with only allowing Brisbane originally to join what is now the NRL and invite them in. When there were several Queensland sides at the time in the 80s and early 90s that should have possibly joined as well to improve the competitiveness. And so therefore Brisbane has that dominant position of basically getting all the Queensland talent at NRL level and nicking from Gold Coast and North Queensland. And that's why North Queensland were terrible for years and are terrible again. And that's why the Crushers didn't work. What was the other one? There was another one. Gold Coast Crushers, and there was another Gold Coast team as well. Oh shit! Was it Tweed Heads? Gold Coast Tweed? There was a second Gold Coast team that didn't work as well. This Titans team, admittedly, they've not been very successful. But it's the Redcliffe Dolphins, so that's North Brisbane. They're just dropping Redcliffe and calling it the Dolphins, which I find ridiculous. I would say go with Redcliffe, but the NRL's gone no. Personally, I think Ipswich should have got it, but that's a personal opinion. So the Dolphins, which are from the Redcliffe area of Brisbane, they're going to be the wealthiest NRL club as well. They've got over 100 million in the bank. They've got assets, so they own their own stadium, much like Cronulla do. They'll be the second NRL team to own their own stadium, which massively. That's it. The Giants, Seagulls, Gladiators, and Chargers. No, it was Crushers. It was the Crushers as well. So many issues with the Super League war as well didn't help. But the initial fault is allowing the only Queensland team initially was Brisbane. And that meant the Broncos could just go, we'll have all the best Queensland talent. Trivia question. How many gold medals have Team GB won? In what sport? What sport are we talking about? Because if we're talking Olympics and ice hockey, they won gold in 1936 and 2 silvers. Yeah, but they were technically based on Gold Coast. Technically, that was technically a Gold Coast-based team, just with a South Queensland name for reasons. But there has been issues in growing stability in that part of Southeast ice hockey. We're talking World Championships, or we're talking Olympics, because in the Olympics we actually have 1 gold and 2 silvers. So, admittedly, all before World War II, but we have. World Championships, I don't think we have at the top level. So that's an interesting one. But in the Winter Olympics, we have won medals. Yes, we have won medals. Yes, in 1936, they won Olympic gold. Um, yeah, I think they were meant to be. Their catchment area is meant to be Gold Coast and South Brisbane. Um, meant to be, but they failed as well because the irony of what was New South Wales Rugby League was inviting the Broncos and the Newcastle Knights in, and Brisbane were the only Queensland team until I think it was 1995, if I'm not mistaken. And and then you get North Queensland join, and then you have all the various Gold Coast teams in both the Super League and what became the NRL. And then the Titans before the Dolphins joined were the 16th team, and they only joined in, I think it was 2008. I might be wrong. I think it's 2008. It might be 2005. I did an NRL history video. I looked at all the clubs and their history, and they've never really. They had a couple of seasons where they made finals football consecutively, and then Greg Bird and his issues, and then the club having money problems and not getting Cherry Evans. Um, and into 2015, and then basically the NRL owned the club for a while, and then there was the Jared Hayne experiment. Yes, the Jared Hayne experiment, and then Justin Holbrook takes over at the beginning of the 2020 season, and now things are looking good. They've got good ownership with the Frizzell family. They've got good coach. Their youth setup is finally working and producing talent. They're signing some of the best young talent for Fifita. AJ Brimson, Jaden Campbell. They look now like an NRL team that's gonna compete. Yeah, Wayne Bennett. Yeah, it's interesting with yeah, that's the issue. That's the issue with Gold Coast. So one way I went from a 2010 grand final, and then they get the wooden spoon within 12 months. The wooden spoon is something. Um, Harvey Elliott. Oh, there's a lot of questions coming in now. A lot of questions. A lot of questions. Um, yeah, the Wayne Bennett thing. I mean, that was going to be a given. He was already off contract at South Sydney. He would be available. There'd be no having to buy him out of a contract, and therefore compensate the team that he's leaving, which is beneficial to them. They want to get an icon like Wayne Bennett in so they can attract predominantly a Queensland core, maybe some New South Wales players as well to form the core. And then with the issues happening in Super League, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of English talent, um, wanting or Super League talent wanting to come over. And there's some very good young talented English players and French players who I think could quite easily go straight over to the NRL and fit in seamlessly because they're young, they're talented, they want to play at pace, they've got skill, they've got pace, they've got power, and they can get paid more. And the Dolphins are going to want to start signing players during next season for 2023 when they come in. So there's only this time in 12 months that we will be starting preseason. If you think about it, players will be returning from their holidays, getting ready for preseason training, and that'll be the first training camp. So it's only 12 months away that we're talking about, training camp for um, the Dolphins, their first training camp. I mean, their kit looks terrible, though. I have to admit, their inaugural kit looks absolutely below par. It's not a rugby league kit. Some of the Aussie kind of media were calling it like a soccer kit or a football kit. I actually have to agree with them. It's a cheesy 90s style old Division 1 EFL kit. Yes, the NRL is far superior to Super League in all facets, in both money, player depth, talent. skill set, global appeal because the Americans watch it as well. Um, it is the Premier League of rugby league. It's like the French and English rugby union leagues at the top. Um, I would say the Reims kit, or maybe Lille. It looks a bit like Lille as well, a little bit. Um, uh, Accrington Stanley, that's what it looks like. It looks a bit like the Accrington Stanley kit that they currently have, which is worrying that Accrington Stanley has a better kit than the Redcliffe Dolphins. I would never thought I would say that. I would never thought I'd say Accrington Stanley's got a better kit. Fleetwood Town, another one. That's the problem. Is they've gone very they've obviously looked at global sports, and they are an expansion team. I would have gone with the colours they currently have and the logo they currently have, and kept Redcliffe in the name, because I think Accrington Stanley, who are they? Ian Rush says I should drink my milk, otherwise I won't play for Liverpool and Everton. I'll end up playing for Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley, who are they? Yes, the old Milk Board advert from 1986. That's older than me. The fact I know about that is worrying. I've met Ian Rush. He's a very nice bloke. Can barely understand what he's saying. He's got a very weird accent, but he's a very nice bloke, Ian Rush. Might have to do a career video on Ian Rush. Well, they've got the money. The salary cap will be, I think, about $1 million higher when they come in 2 years' time or 2 seasons' time. The problem is they're going to be looking at signing players at some point next year, and if players get injured or suspended, that really could be difficult. So there's rumours that Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith may want to go there for the Melbourne Storm setup. They're both off contract. They're trying to get Caelan Ponga to leave Newcastle, but then Mitchell Pearce has left Newcastle, which leaves them a little bit of room in the salary cap to extend his deal with an option in his favour and pay him a little bit more money, entice him to stay at Newcastle. There's a few players floating around in the Sydney area and at North Queensland who could be targets. And I think Gold Coast have signed up there. They've got Gold Coast have gone, no, we've got our core now. We've got our youth system working really well and our reserve grade system working really well. I think Brisbane should be concerned. Broncos. I think the Brisbane Broncos should be really worried that they might have a few more players post. I'm not sure Kelly Walters, while he started turning things around towards the second half of the season after State of Origin, I'm not 100% sold that the Broncos are out of this decline that they've been in for the last couple of years. And with Wayne Bennett going up to Redcliffe, the Dolphins, I can see Bennett trying to poach some of the Broncos players who are under contract now. But if they've got a year in their favour at the end where they can talk to other clubs, I can see Wayne Bennett going after some players who are currently at Brisbane. And because the Dolphins have money to spend, they haven't got anyone on their books yet. They are officially announced, but I don't think they're allowed to announce any contract moves until sometime next year. So it'll be interesting to see because they'll be operating under the 2023 salary cap, not 2022 salary cap. So they can offer slightly bigger contracts. So for players in his last year of his contract with an option in his favour, the team he's currently with is operating on the assumption, okay, we've already got our squad, we're going to lose a couple of players. They'll be operating on tighter margins, whereas Redcliffe have no players on their books, no existing contracts to work around. They can sign players for bigger money. I think the Dolphins is going to have quite a good team. Quite a good team. I've done a history video on Accrington Stanley as well, and the original previous Accringtons. But yes, I'm very interested to see how the Redcliffe Dolphins, or the Dolphins as we should call them, how they assemble their team and who's on their roster. There's a lot of strong links with Cameron Munster. There's a few other Queensland players there, like Jason Taumalolo, they're trying to get their hands on as well. Which, if you're a Cowboys fan, a Broncos fan, or you've got a player who's got a year in their favour or is off contract and you want to re-sign, and if you're a fan of the Super League and you've got a young player coming through who's in his early mid-20s, hasn't quite peaked yet, and you know that the Super League's got money problems, You know this team's coming in. There could be some Super League talent going over, and I think some French and English players will definitely Boffin Zurich. Yes, smooth and mild, but terribly. I should start vaping again. I believe so. I believe they're going to have a Queensland Cup team who will be the development team. I'd be interested to see how many of the current Redcliffe Dolphins players who are playing on 20s Q Cup take that step up um, in the next 12 months. This time in 12 months' time, we'll be talking about what the roster's going to look like, you know, what talent they're going to sign. And I wouldn't be surprised if some Super League players, English and French players, are brave enough to go. Is there a limit on the amount of overseas players who come over? I would say 5 or 6 could definitely end up, definitely in my opinion. And there might be a couple of veteran English and French players who want to wind down their careers for a couple of years and play a couple of seasons. So I reckon there's going to be some young English forwards who take the risk, and maybe some of the French backs as well. There has to be. If the French want to kick on, then I think and develop with Toulouse and Catalan both in Super League next year. I can see there being an excess of French talent. Um, I would say the Queensland Cup and New South Wales Cup competitions, their side's pretty solid. They'll be somewhere between Super League and Championship. I think they'll be very good in the Championship, and maybe around the fringes of getting to a bear in mind they're more younger players in Queensland and New South Wales Cup, so um, they wouldn't quite have enough senior players, I don't think, to compete over a full season. Because a lot of the Q Cup sides lose their players to NRL sides, cover injuries and suspension and state of origin, so you never really have your full Cup roster. That's the problem. Is the NRL sides will go, look, we've got a couple of injuries, you're getting called up. Bang, you're out the side. You're out the side. You're getting some time with the main squad, and that's a problem. All they go to a player, you're having a bit of a rough time. You're going down, so there's always a lot of roster change for the cup sides. But there's good quality. Don't get me wrong with it. It's a good development ground and learning ground for young players. And if a senior player's coming back from injury or has had a dip in form, that they add that kind of experience to a side, and that can change how a side plays massively. Um, Absolutely massively. But a lot of the Queensland Cup and New South Wales Cup younger players would definitely fit into a Super League or Championship side piece of piss. And definitely, well, they've already got the historical fan bases and then their foundation clubs, so they've got that hardcore fan base. And the North Sydney Bears, there's calls to bring them back as the 18th team. So I've got an annoying itch on my back. But there are calls to bring back the North Sydney Bears. And to be fair, I can understand it, but it's the amount of teams in Sydney. In order to be called a truly national competition, got the little bugger. That's it. Got the little. Oh, there's been a lot of armed police around where I live today. A lot of police. Yes, I mean the fan base is there. It's just the congested market in Sydney, and I think Brisbane, as a city, could have another team, at least 2 or 3 teams that call themselves North Souths and Brisbane itself, much like Sydney. Um, and technically, I would class Gold Coast as an extension of Brisbane. So now you're going to have 3 Brisbane teams technically, just for the metropolitan area. It's a difficult one because I think no, I wouldn't go Adelaide. I personally would go either the South Island of New Zealand or Perth. Perth because it's a faster growing city, it's got more corporate money, and therefore and better facilities for rugby league, and the state league does pretty well. And there's actually a couple of Western Australian players playing in the NRL and in Queensland and New South Wales Cup, so it's got a better production. They've tried Perth and Adelaide before, but Perth would make more sense on a commercial side of things for the corporate money and the links to the rest of Australia. The infrastructure in Perth is a lot better than Adelaide. The employment, so the disposable income in Western Australia is better than South Australia as well. The Western Reds, I think, travelled did for them as well. They had a very good side actually for players that were actually playing there. The team was quite good. It was the travel really did them in. Much like why the New Zealand Warriors struggle as well is the travel. But if you're looking from a money side of things and getting sponsors, getting a fan base, Perth makes more sense. But the reason why the AFL's done better, that's why it's the travel. I don't think that would happen now. I think if Perth was to put in a bid now, that wouldn't be the case. There's far much money at the time when Adelaide and the Rams and the Reds were initially in the NRL. There was less money because the Super League War had basically financially wrecked the game, and that agreement was madness. It was stupid, and the NRL should take responsibility why two potential markets that could have been very, very successful failed. The NRL leadership at the time, the governance of the game at the time, there was not enough money. And bear in mind, in the mid-90s, the average salaries and the average money in Australia was a lot less than it is now. The league now is worth billions. And that is a problem. They were entering a very congested, successful market when they were the new guys, and they didn't do very well. And the team wasn't very good. Whereas Perth's team was actually quite good, but the financial side of it killed them. That wouldn't happen now. That's why I think a Perth team would succeed now and should succeed now. That's what I mean. I think now the NRL's learnt its lessons, and I think if they were to have a team in Perth now, it would succeed. It would work. And I think the NRL would have learnt its lessons from 20 years ago when it all went Pete Tong, because the game has got more money. And when the league restarted last year, it was the first professional sports league in the world to restart, so the Americans bought in. And the Americans have got an interest. And when you can sell that to the American market, you're going to be licensed to print money in the future. That's my. I don't think News Limited would have any involvement now in the Murdoch family. And there's been question marks over the Melbourne ownership and the salary cap breaches and the reason why Melbourne was successful off the gate and such. I honestly think if Perth was to put in a bid now to be the 18th team, it would be successful. And I think the NRL has learnt the lessons from the disaster that was the early years when the league was at 20 teams and is now at 16, soon to be 17. It contracted. It got down to 15 teams at one point. You don't want an odd team league. That's annoying. That's what the NHL figured out very quickly. With 31 teams, we've got to get a 32nd team in within a few years. It took 5 years, but they got that even team league again. So it took 5 years. So I reckon, in about 4 or 5 years, Perth will have a team, or the South Island of New Zealand will have a team. Maybe the West Tigers get split up and Balmain come back, or the North Sydney Bears come back. I think it will be an 18-team league eventually, because the AFL has been at 18 teams now for quite some time, and those newer teams are starting to get more consistent and more successful and more competitive. And the AFL stuck with it when the teams weren't very good and supported them. And so in my opinion, I think a Perth bid would work. I think a South New Zealand bid would work now. They did, and that was, bear in mind, 2006. What year is it now? It's 2021. We have moved so far down the track. 15 years later, I honestly believe a bid now from one of those would now work. We have to look at why it failed, and you've obviously done your research about why these teams failed and why these bids failed. I think we have to look at it Um, I have to think. You have to think of it now, especially the Western Australian economy now is so strong. It's basically been propping up the Australian economy for the last 18 months. Um, if Perth was coming with a bid now, I have no doubt in my mind it would be successful. If they say we're going to come in 2025, the NRL would bite your hand off to that. They would bite your hand off to that because they've got the stadium already. The city's got the infrastructure already. It's got a sporting culture. It's an underutilized sporting culture, I think. Um, oh yeah, I know about the Central Coast and the bid behind it. Um, and it's an interesting one. It is a very interesting one. But again, Central Coast have the stadium. It could work now if a different backer was to come in. Um, but again, the NRL and the ARL commission has got different leadership now. Completely different leadership now. That is for me a big difference. Um, and you know, the AFL have been taking it to the NRL with the Gold Coast Suns, with the Sydney Swans, with the Greater Western Sydney, which is basically Canberra. They've been going to Rugby League Heartlands, and these teams are starting to now prove themselves on the field. They're stronger than they were before. The AFL stuck by them when there was a lot of calls to get rid of the teams. The AFL stuck with the process and backed these new teams, and it's paying off. Patience has paid off with the AFL. Now, does the AFL have problems? Yeah. Is it a perfect league? No. Is Gil McLachlan a little bit of a melt as a commissioner? Yep, a little bit. He's a bit. Gil McLachlan is a little bit passive when it comes to being the CEO of the AFL. He does come across as very, very passive. Um, but the AFL doesn't seem to have as many problems as the NRL when it comes to issues off field with players, teams having financial. I wouldn't say it's run way better. I just think it's had more stability when it comes to the front office. It's obviously gone, okay, we want to be classed as a national competition. We'll play in it. We'll play all the state and territory leagues will be of a high standard. So when they feed players into the draft and feed players into selection, they already are playing at a higher standard at state level and territory level. So when they actually do take that step up, they're not, these players aren't out of their depth. We'll get the best Gaelic football players from Ireland and get them over from Ireland. So they're willing to take a risk with players who play a completely different sport and in a different sporting culture and get them over. Um, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and watched a lot of interviews and documentaries about rugby league, and the way it's been governed has been so shockingly poor for so long. And there has been a lot of corruption in there, and there has been massive problems with player discipline off the field and how clubs are run off, away from just the on-field stuff. The West Tigers is a basket case. The merger between the North Sydney Bears and the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles was a disaster. The St George Illawarra Dragons is not working efficiently, even though they have won a grand final. So the dual venture clubs don't work, doesn't work. But that was the broadcaster saying, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. You've got to contract the league. You've got to make teams move. These are foundation clubs. These are clubs that built the game over 6, 7, 8 decades. We're told you're not going to exist anymore. Um, on another day, if South Africa had a full 2-year test schedule behind them, England don't win that. Um, you know, um, but you can learn more from a scrappy win than a dominant win. You can learn more lessons. There's a lot of new players in the squad, new fly half, for example. A lot of young players, playing in the centres and in the forward pack. And this is a squad in transition. We're midway through a World Cup cycle. But if the South Africans had played a full 2-year test cycle like the All Blacks and Australia had done, I think it's a different story. Because I think the Springboks have only just come back to play for the Lions tour onwards. And with everything that's going on with the Springboks, with Erasmus off the field and bits and pieces like that, that helps England. It does. The penalty count's still too high. And I've been heavily critical, even though when England win, I always go, penalty count is too high. It doesn't matter if they're playing a tier 2 nation or tier 3 nation in the World Cup, or if they're playing a tier 1 nation when it comes to the autumn tests, or, they're playing in the Six Nations, or they're playing the summer tours. Even when we played Argentina a few years ago on the 2-test tour, where Christian Way got his own England cap, and this is before I think it was just after the 2015 World Cup, if I remember. We played in Salta, which is the heartbeat of Argentinian rugby union, where a lot of the players come from. We won both tests. No, we played really, really well. As in, one dominant, good, solid performances against a seasoned Argentinian side. That was Nicolas Sanchez's first couple of tests, I think. Penalty count. And yeah, we win by a point. But if that game is played again this weekend, we lose by a point. That is the fine margins. I think there was a lot of luck involved in that, the penalty count. Win or lose, that penalty count is still far too high. And I look at any professional sports team, be it international or club level, and teams that generally play really well and are happy, I say happy, united dressing room, singing off the same hymn sheet, going in the same direction, their penalty count is lower. If you've got penalties, like, their penalty count is generally lower. Generally, although some teams generally play that nasty, gnarly physical style when it comes to like rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, football, that kind of thing, where they know part of their DNA is to be nasty, to be physical, to rough up the opposition, and they will give a higher free kick penalty count away. Infringements where they're penalised. But I noticed that in the NRL this last season, the teams with lower penalty counts went further, and includes getting into the finals, than those teams with stupidly high penalty counts. Rugby union, the teams that I was watching a lot of. Obviously, I watched a lot of women's rugby the last month. Generally, the penalty counts were pretty even. I think it's just the way that the women's game is played. It's a very even penalty count. But long term, when you're looking at trends, the English penalty count is the highest penalty count in the Six Nations. If you look at the Six Nations over the last 5 years, England have the highest penalty count, higher than Italy, higher than France. And France and Italy are known for their bad discipline historically. That's historical, in the past. Their penalty count is you want to average about 9 to 10 penalties per game. England averaged that in their first half. And we're talking about international level across the board. Just across the board, doesn't matter what level you're playing at, you want to average anywhere between 7 and 14 per game. And sometimes England in the first half do what you do in an average. So that's where I think the problem lies. Now, why is that? Is it the style of defence they're playing? Is it the breakdown where there's a lot of penalties? Is it the scrum is just a lottery? It just depends who the referee sees early on. So scrum penalties, you can take that out a little bit, but it's in open play penalties. So whether you're on attack, which are coach killers, or you're giving away a penalty for the team. I can see him becoming a winger and transitioning, doing a Gareth Bale, where Gareth Bale started off as a wing back, right, left back, and ended up being a right or left winger. I can see that. I can see eventually if Klopp is happy with his development as a player. I think he wants to develop him a bit slower because at the moment he's still young, he's still a raw talent. I can see a transition to maybe an out and out winger rather than a midfielder. I can see him playing on the flank because he's brilliant coming from deep and then crossing the ball in, and he's got excessive pace. His crossing ability is insane. and his dead ball as well. I can personally see him starting on the wing at some point, becoming an out and out winger or an out and out wing back, an attack minded wing back. That's where I see his potential. No, I can see him become an attacking wing back or just an out and out winger rather than a right back with attack mentality. I can see him being used in a more offensive side of the game in attack more than defence. So I can see him being a proper old school winger, which will do run the touchline. I can see him becoming a proper 1970s style winger who will just chug up and down. I can see that being his all round position, his best position at club and country will be just a solid old school winger. Whose role is to hug the touchline and just spread the play and just because he can run all day. If you look at you're gonna have to look at older footage, and I'm saying you're gonna go back to the 60s to the 80s. Trent Alexander-Arnold has the physique, the style of play to be an out and out winger, just literally an old school number 11 or number 9 or number 10, number 8, an out and out winger, with the number 11 on his back, just running the wing. And I think he could be transferable to running down the left wing as well. That's again personal opinion. That's where I can see him being his most effective, using his pace. And if you use him as an out and out attacking wing back, so be it. But I can see him transitioning to the wing full time, just because of his pace, and he can score goals, and he can create. So he not only can he create the finish for the attacker or the players in the box, he can also be the one finishing the attacking play, which he could start, or it's him finishing off. So I can see him doing like a Gareth Bale type, where he starts off as a left or right back. So he's right back now, right wing back now, a bit more defensively minded, and then transition to that more attack minded. Yeah. Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw needs to stay fit, and this latest concussion can end a career like that. He's had a good spell for 18 months, and all that promise he showed at Southampton has not been there at United, and injuries are a massive concern. He did have a bad leg breaking there, but apart from that, he's had other consistent injuries, and he can't get a consistent run. And the last 18 months have shown what he can do with good diet, good motivation, and playing his best brand of football. He has. He has. So again, I don't like using overall analytics to judge players. And Reece James is that little bit more of a central player who can play on the right side of midfield and do it very competently for Chelsea and be that box to box right side of midfielder. I think Alexander Arnold is going to end up as a out and out winger, and then that can only benefit both club and country. But I would say watch both of them because they're both equally talented and they both are great getting the ball into the box. They're great. Trent has got more pace, but Reece James has got better positional sense. So that's where you want Trent to be the winger and Reece James on his inside. And then you imagine that. Imagine that as a duo working for country. That would be insane. But on the same side of it, I think Trent's still a raw talent, whereas Reece James he's a little bit more rounded in his style of play. But at the same time, they play slightly different roles at their clubs, where Reece James is a bit more used in midfield as well as defence, where Trent Alexander-Arnold has got more pace. That's where I see him converting to the wing. I think Klopp was going to have to realise that eventually, that his best position is actually just out and out, just running the wing, stretching the play, keeping the pitch, using the full width of the pitch. And, I think he will thrive in that kind of role. It's, at the moment, his style suits Liverpool's style. And Klopp is using that to his advantage because he's using Trent's current strength to the team's favour, but they've got to work around his weaknesses, and that is a known fact. He's still young, still developing. He hasn't fully settled into what his final position is going to be or how versatile he's going to be. Whereas Reece James, I think, with the style of play that he plays and the fact he plays more than one role for the club, he's already learned the defensive side of the game because he's a bit more defensively prudent, and he's also more competent in midfield. on a set role. So they're both, I think, equal in ability. It's their all-round game is where Reece James is that little bit further ahead. He's had less injuries as well. Trent's had a lot of injuries. Reece James hasn't. When you're young players and you have injury problems and little niggles or serious injuries, and you miss out on a tournament helps with your development as well. They've both won major trophies. They both played in major finals. They It's a difficult one because I can see Reece James in midfield with Trent Alexander-Arnold as his winger, and I can see them as a very good combination down the right-hand side. The weakness for England is at the left-hand side, ironically. And if you can get one of them to convert to the left-hand side and cut in on their right foot, oh my God. If you can imagine them both playing on the left, that would be insane. Because they were both cutting on their right, and Reece James is 2-footed. No, they're both 2-footed, actually. Because I've seen Trent cross with his left, and he has played down the left for Liverpool occasionally when needs arise with injury problems. So they will play wherever the coach tells them to play. Simple as. They are both sponges for absorbing, information. And to be fair, Trent Alexander-Arnold is far more defensively competent than a lot of the other wing backs and right backs. He's good at everything. You could play them both up front, and they would do the job for you. That's the thing. They're so young and they're so talented that if a coach goes, "I need you to play on the right," I wouldn't say he's average. I just say his all-round game is a lot more rounded, so he's more utilitarian. You can probably tell Reece James, you're playing up front today because we've run out of centre forwards, but you're playing up front because he is good in the air. He is physical. He can stand up challenges. He can make challenges. He can read the game. He's a good foil for Jordan Henderson, ironically, in midfield. And Declan Rice and others, when they make a move out of position, he can just slot into a defensive midfielding holding role. He's done that. He's played on the left-hand side of midfield for Chelsea at times. So has that tempered his overall peak ability in attack? Possibly. But I think he's a more rounded player than Trent Alexander-Arnold. But comparing them is different because for club, they play different roles. One's a wing-back, possibly going to be a winger in future, and the other one is more of a centralised right-back, and then can do the shift into midfield and can play on the left if required, or in a holding defensive midfield role, or a sweeper role if you want him to. In fact, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold could play sweeper as well if you were doing a hybrid formation. But they do slightly different roles at club, and at country they're asked different things to do. And then you've got Kieran Trippier who can play both sides. And he's older, more experienced, a veteran player. Again, he's won silverware as well. He's played on the biggest stage. He's played in top leagues. So then you have that competition. But then you've got three players. I mean, two of them can play midfield and one can play wing back. It's you can have a very, very solid attack-minded defenders who can play midfield or on the wing. It's a no-brainer for me that you want to currently play them to their strongest position, which means one of them has to miss out because Trippier can play on the left-hand side and do it very competently if Luke Shaw's injured. And James and Trippier can play in midfield. And then you can use Reece James as a holding midfielder, play Trippier on the right, and then Reece James running on as a wing-back. So you can have a plan B, which Southgate somehow, unfortunately, Pissing lacks. He doesn't like going to the plan B. But they're also pretty good at club. Let's be honest. All three of them are good from dead balls. All three of them can score from direct free kicks or indirect free kicks. They're all good from corners, and they're all good in open play. So it's the fact that Trippier is the more senior of the three and can give a lot of experience and teach the younger lads, a few little tricks. It's good having that senior player around the two junior players, and all three of them have won, league winners' medals. They've played in major cup finals. Yeah, but bear in mind, Foden is more of a midfielder already, and Trent has been coming back from a serious groin injury. So, yes, you could say I've experimented against a weaker side, but Andorra are going to set up very strong defensively. They're going to tackle aggressively, and if you're a player coming back from a groin operation and a hamstring problem, I wouldn't necessarily put him in against a side against Andorra who are going to be let's close down the midfield. 2 banks of 4, and let's kick the shit out of them. That's not, I think, the game he should have played that experiment. You do that experiment in a warm up friendly for a tournament if you want to go. Okay, I need a plan B. He did that, and Trent got injured. So Trent's had his injuries, and that experiment against Andorra, wrong match to do it. Wrong match to do it. Whereas Foden already does play a lot of midfield roles for City in various positions in that midfield, and can cover anywhere in the midfield for City, depending on you know where he's told to play. If he's coming off the bench, if he's starting. So Foden is going to nail it anyway because he's a midfielder to an attacking midfielder, so sometimes a secondary striker. So he's going to be more used to playing in the centre rather than Trent, who's used to playing on the width. So that's where Southgate made a mistake. That's not on the player. That's on the manager not playing to the player's strengths. When they've had a few injury concerns and wrong opposition to do that experiment because he's not going to have the space in that area to be effective because the Andorra, it doesn't matter if it's Andorra or Albania or any team, they're going to be congesting the midfield and physical in the tackling. And when I say physical, I mean they're going to go in and it's going to hurt. Young player, had a few injuries, needs his pace to be effective. Putting him in the midfield takes away his prime strength, which is running with the ball in wide areas. Put him in the middle in a central channel is not going to work. End on, not going to work. And Southgate got found out with poor tactics. That's not Trent's fault. That's not his strength. That's actually playing to a weakness. He's less effective in congested central areas. He's better in the wide areas where you have less congestion and he can go past players with his pace, make the runs with his pace. And that's on Southgate. That's not on the player. That's on a manager not playing players in their strongest positions, which therefore benefits the team when the players are more comfortable with what they're doing and what they're used to at club level. And Klopp is quite right to criticise Southgate for playing a player out of position who A is not had a decent run for a little while because of injury, and B, it goes against his strengths and he's still developing as a player. If Klopp wants to then experiment with Trent, that's a different thing. That's his club manager. And he's got to do what's best for the club team in the league season. No, Pep gets found out in tactically in games. He does. He has been. He has been found out. Um, and Pep's team's Champions League final, and I think it was the Copa del Rey final as well against Mourinho. He got found out. Yeah, Southgate. The problem is all the English clubs and the European clubs all play different styles, and none of their styles are exactly the same as what England play. Now, while I agree with coaching defensively, in attack, I think you want to allow players just to see what's in front of them and be less rigid in your coaching in attack. You want to get players, if you're saying you're playing down the right hand side, you three, work with yourselves, with your combinations, figure out something that works. Put some responsibility on the players to actually go, right, you 3 or 4 players, you're going to be working down the right hand side, you guys will be working down the left, you're going to be working down the middle, figure out some combinations. We're going to put a defensive lineup in front of you, play around that. Where you do half and halves, where you get the whole squad, mix it up a bit, and then that's how you figure out your combinations in attack. Is like, okay, what players work well together in attack? Defense, you've got to learn your defensive procedures and your defensive formations, which is the 4-3-3, the 4-4-2, the 4-5-1. That's how you set up defensively. In attack, that's where things change. Newcastle signings, God knows who they're going to sign. They have to be within financial fair play. Remember that. So I think we're looking at around 300 million. He's going to have to spend. He's got 5 weeks to scout players, and he's got 5 weeks with the current squad he's got anyhow. So I don't know who. We'll see. We'll see. We'll have to see on Newcastle. I think it's too early to tell. Burnley are the only team around them who haven't changed manager. All the other clubs around them have changed manager this season. So there's a lot of clubs who are all in a fight, and it will be interesting to see who does escape the drop. I think Norwich are done, but we'll see who's bottom by Christmas. I think only two teams who've been bottom by Christmas have stayed up. One of them being Leicester City. Following season, they win the Premier League. Not been threatened with relegation since. And I think who was the other team? There was another team that was bottom by Christmas that stayed up. I'm trying to think of it. Well, I think it's West Brom. I'm gonna have to look at that bottom by Christmas and who stayed up. I mean, two teams have been bottom at Christmas, or in the bottom three at Christmas and stayed up. One of them is Leicester. I don't know who the other one is. That's going to really annoy me now. There's another one that's been bottom at Christmas and stayed up. But generally, if you're in the bottom three by Christmas, chances are you're not staying up. If you're in the bottom, um, yeah, I think it is West Brom. I think it is West Brom who stayed up. And who was their manager who kept them up? That is going to annoy me now. That is going to really frustrate me now. I know Leicester were the other team that were bottom by Christmas, and they turned it around and they stayed up. So and they won the Premier League the following season. I think Villa are in trouble. I don't know what Gerrard's going to do with signings wise. But they losing Grealish has done them. They've lost all balance in their side. They've lost the heartbeat of their team. That's hard to replace. And they haven't got going this season. Every team down the bottom hasn't got going this season. Now Burnley are notoriously slow starters, but they grind things out. Norwich are a yo-yo club, we know that. Newcastle, that's bad ownership for years. It's bad ownership for years. And Steve Bruce faced the same challenges as Rafa, and the fans didn't get behind him. So I don't know what you do. I don't know what they expect of Eddie Howe, because he's still got 5 weeks to work with the same dead weight that the previous two managers coached to above where they should have been. Gerrard will definitely bring more youth in. He will look to Rangers to nick a few players, I think, and who lost their first game under Van Bronckhorst 3-1 to Hibs, by the way. So I can see that, and yeah, Villa have had a very good youth system for a very long time. I can see Gerrard promoting some of the youth players to more responsibility, and yeah, winning in Scotland's not as hard, admittedly, but he still had to work with the fact that they were below Aberdeen, below Celtic. Flip that on his head. I think it was Pardew. I think it was. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, I've got to actually get an early night, so I really appreciate, obviously, all the questions. We've discussed a lot of things, actually, a lot of things, and not necessarily all the things I wanted to talk about either. I didn't talk about much about the cricket with what's going on with both Australia and England being beset by scandal, and a lot of people are actually feeling very sorry for Tim Paine losing the Australian captaincy due to the fact he was cleared by an investigation in 2018 for alleged misconduct in 2017. Cricket Australia were aware of the fact following the ball tampering scandal when they named him captain that this was on his record, went ahead with it, and now they've basically thrown him under the bus. So Cricket Australia have a lot of questions to answer for the culture within Australian cricket, as well as the culture within English cricket with the ECB as well. There's a lot hinging on this Ashes series to fix things. No, it wasn't Brian Robson. Wasn't Brian Robson. Middlesbrough got relegated when he was manager. Wasn't Brian Robson. I'm trying to think who it was now. Middlesbrough went down. They were the first team to play an FA Cup final and get relegated the same season. Wigan were the second team, and they were Wigan the only team to win the FA Cup and get relegated. And Birmingham City are the only club to win the League Cup and get relegated as well. So there you go. That's once we're. But yes, I will have some more videos for you very, very soon.